I have to go attend to my cat who is yelling at me about something. Can I help you, sir? Yeah.
We have Reddist in the chat, and so chat, let us know if we're all coming through with our voices and such. I've never actually used this as the StreamYard host before, so just hoping we're all everything's good, you know.
Well, you can pull up your own YouTube channel.
I'm doing that right now.
Yeah, that's what I'm doing too.
Are you guys getting any echo from me? I don't have my headphones in. I didn't know if my mic would parcel that.
It's not a noticeable echo. Like we can tell that you're not wearing a mic, but it's not a not a distracting.
Let me do my headphones really quick, and that should fix that.
God damn it! My cat was meowing at me to let me out of that room, and now he's meowing at me to let him back in.
Typical cat.
Okay. All right. So, well, what is dead may never die. It only rises again with a new mic or program. I love it. So yeah, we're just kind of get the start going on here. But our tentative topic for the day, for anybody who's just joining now, we got a couple people watching, is going to be kind of gods and magic and such. And we'll just talk about opinions on it, incidences of it, so on and so forth. I'm sure that we will, as always, just kind of end up in the weeds because we just tend to end up in the weeds one way or another. I might end up in the weeds here in a second right now. I'm also eating a quesadilla, so be aware that I just haven't had lunch yet. So if you hear me make awkward pauses or something like that, it's just because I'm nomming some food right now. So
that's fine.
With that said,
good.
And with Russ's cat taking off from us, I love your cat's pattern, by the way. My boot cat, the one that is on the prescription tree right now, is also a tabby. So I have one little girl.
Yeah, he's got a darker tabby older brother.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I should change I should put on an icon here for people to see.
Yeah, if you want to put something up.
Let me see how to.
Yeah, and it has your display name as Stoner Tormund instead of Ondi. I don't know if you know that you have control over that.
I do go by both, so that is fine. That's not the issue.
Okay. Just wanted to make sure that you knew you had control over that.
Yes, thank you. I appreciate that very much.
So to start us off, I think the big question about anything with magic, in A Song of Ice and Fire, and or anything with gods, is always does it exist, and or what is its existence like? Like, I come from the school of, I guess I can, we have such a deep fandom now, I can probably say the school of, I come from the school of watching Preston Jacobs's videos and getting real, stonered and tormented and watching those. And so he presented the idea that magic in A Song of Ice and Fire is teak from the classic George R. Martin book series, and there's a fair amount of evidence to back this up. And this kind of lines it up, I guess, with what I would say is more like X-Men powers. Like, or if you guys watch the show Invincible, and actually I got my girlfriend here with me today. We were watching Invincible last night, and it's all got superhero powers and shit like that, right? And the powers in Invincible are not explained as like necessarily coming from any one place, but for example, someone might have a family curse or something like that, or they might have been born with a genetic just like abnormality, or like or some kind of disfigurement that makes you have super strength and you look like a monster or whatever. Yeah, and so that's kind of one way of thinking about magic in A Song of Ice and Fire. And that, I think, is if you guys have watched the genetics of dragons and war and that sort of stuff, the Preston Jacobs series, this is kind of something that's been around in the fandom for quite a while. And then there's the more classic interpretation, which is, I think, is just, this is kind of lore like unexplainable magic in the sense of other sort of fiction sort of stories where it's not so much about the origins of the magic. And maybe gods aren't real, but magic is real. That's one way of thinking about it. And it's more of this organic universal force. And then there's the idea that the gods are real and they have their own magic. And I don't want to dip into pantheons of old religion, because honestly, I'm like not very well educated in that shit. But like, if you think of like Greek gods or whatever, like Greek gods had powers and stuff. And their powers didn't seem necessarily overlap. Like, I don't know the origin stories of the Greek gods' powers, but for example, like the Greek gods had numerous, like there's a god of the hearth or whatever, and there's Dionysus and there's Zeus and there's, it's a big structure of shit. And so people often had very different powers. And so, perhaps certain gods could exert more influence over the earth than others. And if you think of it that way, that's another way of thinking about it. So after that long ramble of kind of the three ways that I think about it might being, I want to kick it over to you guys. And I guess we'll start with Stoner Torment. We'll start with Andy. How do you look at it? How do you look at magic and gods,
Personally, as far as I've kind of gone back and forth about this, because on one hand, I've kind of always been convinced that George R. R. Martin has very, very rarely written about gods in a certain way that they exist in a genuine literal way. There are a couple of stories. Well, I'm thinking I'm gonna cite The Lonely Songs of Larendor, which is a beautiful story that should be read and has implications for the origins of the Seven, if you want to believe in gods in a Song of Ice and Fire real. But besides the fact that I'm convinced gods are not real, I've kind of gone back and forth on whether we should treat this more as you said, like X-Men type abilities that you're kind of innately born with, and just being like, yeah, maybe we should not question it that much in the sense of like gods don't exist, but magic is real. There isn't like a bigger thing going on in the background. I've kind of gone back and forth on this. I'm honestly gonna be real. I don't think I have a 100%. I'm completely convinced opinion on this. I'm kind of still thinking about it in some ways, and I'm very much open to being convinced to one way or the other. But like, really, I don't think I've made up my mind.
I think it's a little intentional that we don't have enough information to make up our minds yet.
Yeah, I think that's part of it. I was going to say, do you think that there's any credence more on one side than the other? Like, for example, in the Lorendor, do you think that that's more evidence of gods than that we see in the Song of Ice and Fire? Do you think it's kind of similar? Like, it's been. I remember Lorendor, like either reading it or listening to the synopsis about it, but I honestly can't remember much about it.
I mean, the thing is, okay, I will go very quickly through.
That might have been the ones might have been the ones I actually missed, though. There were a few old Martin ones that I missed. That might have been one of them.
Now, I can give a very quick synopsis. Lonely Songs of Larendor was supposed to be the first in a run of George R. R. Martin connected short stories that were more fantasy, as opposed to science fiction, although they very clearly involved science fiction elements, like most of his works at the time. And basically in this one, there are gods. They're called the Seven, which I will draw attention to. And they're very explicitly evil because they're preventing the protagonist. They've stolen the protagonist's lover. And this protagonist is on a quest to save her lover. Now, as far as I'm concerned, I don't think gods are necessarily real in A Song of Ice and Fire per se. I'm more convinced of that. Mainly because it's very rare that George really writes about gods being real. A lot of it is more about the human element, and that's been a choice made by George R. R. Martin countless times. And well, I don't think I'm not in the camp of people who believe that The Song of Ice and Fire is in the Thousand Worlds universe. That I would say that's ridiculous. Mostly because I don't. Well, not ridiculous. Okay, that's a bit harsh, but like, it's in the sense of. I don't like. There are certainly parallels, but I don't see George really wanting to connect it to that.
Yeah, I think he said something to that effect, and then there's Bacalon, but like other than Bacalon, there's maybe no. There's no hard parallels where it's like there's something that you could point to and say it's the exact same thing,
Bacalon Bacalon being present is a reference to his older work in the same way the Seven in A Song of Ice and Fire are a reference to the Seven in
Bacalon seemed like unmodified is I guess how I took it. Like Bacalon just seemed like an unmodified reference. So I was like, you could make the argument from Bacalon that it's the same universe. Because why else would they have an unmodified reference to the Bacalon thing and the statue? But no, I agree with you. I think it is. I think it's a reference to previous works, and he's slipping it in. And it was so minor that he made no attempt to try to change it because he probably didn't think anyone would even remember, other than like core Martin nerds, you know.
Yeah, no, as far like honestly, a lot of what I mean, this is something I don't think a lot of people who haven't delved into George's early works realize. Not that it's easy, because a lot of George's early works are not nearly as highly available in bookstores.
That's true. I have them on PDF, is how I have them. So
they're also not quite as well written.
I mean,
they are rawer. I'll give you that. Like my favorite one of his short stories, and this is even more favorite than Dunk and Egg, even though they are, I would say, much more competently written, is In the House of the Worm. It's raw as hell. Like it's a very raw, from like a literary writer's standpoint. It's, and I would say, a much less formed product than A Song of Ice and Fire or Dunk and Egg, or even several of his other really banger fucking short stories. But I just love it. So I'm saying there's a certain like wild rawness to it that I think does exist. But
honestly, I'm of the opinion that in a way, the reason why, like, I'm going to deviate a bit more and say that the reason we don't have wins is because George, at his most comfortable, is writing short stories.
Yeah.
He isn't as comfortable writing novels and these big epic tales. Like,
I think look at
what his novels that he has published outside of A Song of Ice and Fire are.
Yeah, sorry, Rusty, you want to say something?
It's just I think the reason it's taking him so long to finish is because he's a seat of the pants writer. You know, he designs his characters and then he lets them take the story wherever the story is going to go. And once you set a finish point and you have to manipulate things to reach that finish point, you're suddenly out of your element. You're in a completely different writing style. It's what happened to the show to some degree, where they were like, we have to reach this ending. Okay, so we have to make all of this stuff happen in order to make it happen. And I think he's stuck there. He's trying to bring us to the conclusion without making the characters act too out of character.
I know. I think there's a bit of like a culmination of forces going on here. As someone who tries to create stuff, perfectionism is a real thing. And whenever you're dealing with trying to create something very large and serious, Taco, also the stream is going fantastic, by the way, since you're here in the chat. I think that's a real road bump. And you can look at the Cushing library stuff and you can see that he spends a lot of time doing rewrites, and they're massive. Like there was none of the revelations that blew me away by that shit. It was that I was like, this motherfucker writes all of this stuff. He just writes it all and then just cuts it all like a brutal. Like I thought my cuts when I made my video about Attack on Titan from my other channel, I was cutting out hours of content. I thought that was lots of cuts. No, George R. Martin, he cuts fucking decades of content. That this dude fucking hacks. This dude, you fucking think the Argentinian was or a prime minister or whatever president was with the chainsaw? You think he's bad? No, Martin with the chainsaw in his books. He's wild. He's out of control.
Yeah.
No, and that's real. Like that is a combination element with what Rusty's describing, where you in order, because he's an organic writer, gardening method, whatever you want to call it, because he doesn't have a fully fixed end goal. And it's not structured all the way in a fucking format from one to done. He has to combine these two things, which is it's actually, because I was a gardener for a very long time, it's like sculpting a plant, right? Like you have to trim and grow and trim and it's like, if you ever trim roses, you ever like do like high end roses for people, like big. Or like fruit trees, right? Like this.
I'm into bonsai, so I know what you mean.
Yeah, no. So exactly, because if you do bonsais, you literally know exactly what I mean. It's the same shit for fruit trees, same shit for roses, same shit for high-end. It's even high-end gardening. If you're doing gardening for people with millions of dollars, right? Which I did a couple times actually. Some major mansions, you got to know what the fuck you're doing when it comes to sculpting the plants right. And that is, I feel, the great difficulty for Martin, because stories are not as cooperative as plants. They're just not. You know, and then that is, I think, intersecting with his life, and I think it's intersecting with his desire to do other things. And then to top off what Anya was going to, what Lonnie said last time, I was going to say is that I have often viewed A Song of Ice and Fire as just a collection of intertwining short stories. If you just took all the chapters of Catelyn and made it into a book, it'd be like a novella, you know? Maybe not a novella, it might be longer than that. But you could think of it that way. And I've always thought of it as that way, as these are many short stories happening intertwined within the same universe.
You know, I've got the ability to take audiobooks apart and like put them back together. I put the last 2 books we have so far, I put them in chronological order with the chapters with the audiobook so that you could listen to them that way. It would be, and that's something I hadn't thought of before.
Yeah, no,
doing
honestly,
just
if
one
you
character's POV all the way through the story. I might do that.
If you do that, if there's any way that you could like use Audible or something, how do you do the thing? Because I was gonna say, if you do that, I would love to hear all the cat chapters put back to back, or all the brand chapters back to back, and just go all the way through as an audiobook. That would be fucking really cool.
Yeah, let me take a look at what the name of the program I use is. So I bought the book on Audible, and then I just decrypted it, and then once it's decrypted, it's a regular M4B file, so you can do whatever you want with it.
That's very neat. Yeah, no, I would definitely be interested in hearing several of the characters out. Like Jamie is just one run of Jamie would be really interesting. Yeah. So to continue, I guess.
I was going to try to veer us back into like the magic and god stuff, because in some ways it's hard to say. Like, obviously there is a lot of talk in the story, like chat go into, like someone in chat wrote it, I think it's Kirsty. Kirsty wrote that most of magic is blood-based. Dead, whether it's, you know, about sacrificing blood by killing or just part of the blood. I'm not necessarily fully sure that's all it amounts to, because, I do think there is like a X-Men, X-gene kind of sort of like way that some types of magic work with, but it's not necessarily married to that idea.
So really quick, if I just had to cut in affinity, the timely, wimely, limey. I would disagree with this viewpoint because I would argue that based on what we've seen in the Cushing things, he probably has like a dozen variants of Winds of Winter already not completed, but in various stages of completion in a bunch of pieces. And I don't know if you do projects yourself. I don't know if you work on any big projects, but yeah, one of the things that happens with perfectionism is you will oftentimes end up with projects that have been touched a lot but have not been completed, and that to me is what I think that is going on. At least part of it. Like I said, so I don't think he's leaving it untouched. Like I hardly think that he's just dropping acid and listening to the Grateful Dead and fucking off. Like, I mean, he could be. Don't get me wrong. When the show was very first airing, there was a little behind the scenes thing where he was hanging out with the actors who played Shay, and they were just like going out and drinking tequila and having dinner and just having a fun time. I'm sure he spends some of his time living life doing real people shit. But I would just push back on the idea. I don't think he's leaving it untouched. I think that the problem is he's touching it, maybe not too much, but it's I just think his methodology leads you to have product that is highly touched over and over and over and over and over again without actually you necessarily getting to the finalized product and stuff. So to cut back to what
I wonder if he's like continued writing by the seat of his pants and like brought the story to a conclusion. Like, I would love the idea that he's actually finished the story like 5 or 6 times and just doesn't like it. So he just keeps going back and being like, okay, maybe if I change this one little thing, it'll change what happens. But his characters just refuse to cooperate.
You want to know an Ice and Fire conspiracy theory that I had? Is I think that's why he gave the show to Dave and Dan. Is I think he was like, all right, these guys clearly read book 1 and nothing else. Let's see what they do with it. Let's watch them ride this thing out. And then he, from that, was like, honestly, it's like if you didn't want to watch your rocket burn and you just like, okay, I'm pretty sure I'm going to get this thing into space eventually, but I'll give all my plans over these other guys for a minute, watch them explode it, and then I'll learn some lessons from that. And I could be wrong, but that was one of my conspiracy theories about the show. I think he knew what he was doing when he passed it off, and he was willing to learn from their mistakes. But that's, again, I don't know. If that's true, though, that would contribute again to rewrites. That would be considerable time of him having to maybe learn lessons, go back, rewrite, you know.
Yeah, That's possible, certainly. And now, honestly, I'm not sure that's exactly true given what we do know about George writing, but I don't want to spend too much time on this because we've been on to talk about Magic and Gods, but I'll just explain this very quickly.
I know, yeah, we're getting off in the weeds again.
Yeah, we are, but this is what usually happens here. No, what I was gonna say is that as far as we have seen from George through Nana blogs, and in previous times, especially when he was writing prior to the current drought of books, we got way more updates, and we could glean way more on the way George writes. And George is the type of writer who writes out he doesn't write the book in the way we see it presented. Usually the book, the order of chapters is usually cobbled together later on. It's really, he writes a character until he gets to a dead end with him. Either the character is finished, his story is his or her story is finished for the book, or he just gets a writer's block for this character, so he moves on to another. And it's this kind of way of how he writes, or how he's been described to write, that kind of, I guess the issue is he has so many characters that he has writer's block on that's why we have it would be my...
Well, no, yeah, if he gets writer's block on even a couple of them or one of it still slows your whole thing down. And then again, once your writer's so it'd be, this is just from my own creative processes, I would make this extrapolation. I would imagine, let's say he's stuck on a core character like Tyrion. Yeah, he's got time on his hands to go back and second guess all his writings about other characters.
I think he actually said recently that Tyrion is actually finished for Weirwoods.
Oh, okay. Well, I was just an example. I was just saying, imagine. I just think that if, let's say, you're stuck on something in a project that involves a lot of moving parts, it gives you, it unfortunately frees you up to go back to look at all your other parts and maybe attack them when you shouldn't attack them. So that could also be a problem with we don't know, but hypothetically, I would say that could be a problem with what he's got going on in the writing process. Back to the magic, though.
George Lucas is the archetype of that.
Yeah.
Just can't leave well enough alone.
Yeah, back to the magic, though, as we're talking so much deep about the Martin writing. Teak. Let's talk about Teak for a minute. Andi, you know about Teak. For anyone in the chat who doesn't understand Teak, Andi, do you want to just summarize that shit real fast, and then we'll kind of kick that out?
Teak is shorthand for telekinesis, which is the science fiction ability to move objects with your mind, basically. That would be the definition of telekinesis.
Like manipulation with the mind, yeah.
Yes, as opposed to telepathy, which is the ability to read one's mind.
It's news to me that's related to A Song of Ice and Fire. Where are we going with this?
We're going Thousand Worlds, I think.
No. I was actually going to go straight to A Song of Ice and Fire, right? So you start off with the Teak, which exists all across Thousand Worlds, but also exists in Wildcards, right? It's just Martin territory. But you go to early draft, early creations of A Song of Ice and Fire. The Valerians were pyromancers. They were Teak wielding, as far as I know, pyromancers. And then it was suggested to him, or he thought up, forget the story, the dragons was cooler. And so I just think there's strong reason to buy into that idea that we're just coming straight from that thought stream, But,
so it's like the scene in that Facebook movie where he's like, instead of being like drop the, he's just like turn the telekinesis into dragons.
Yeah,
and then walks away dramatically.
Rather than Daenerys being a fire mage, she's a mother of dragons. I mean, it's pretty fucking lit, right? Either way, but the dragons, I think, is more fantasy in terms of epic fantasy, as opposed to fantasy like Avatar, Airbender, where it's more about what the character's personal elemental fighting powers are.
Yeah.
Yes. I can go a bit into detail about this because I know a bit more about
it. Go with it.
So this idea about Game of Thrones, comes from a discussion, I think, that George R. R. Martin had about what he calls, and again, we're very much retreading like our good friend Preston Jacobs, his territory here.
Yeah, this is the Jacob School. This is basically the Jacob School. This is.
But what we are like what this talks about. There's an interview where he talks about what he calls furniture in fiction, where he basically explains that he thinks that the labels fantasy and sci-fi are really more the sort of setting you're building, as in what you're decorating your world with, and he calls it furniture.
The trappings of the world.
And I think it's in that same interview where he talks about one of his friends, Phyllis Eisenstein, who wrote 2 novels about the Tales of Alaric the Minstrel, is what the series is called. And now he talks about having a discussion because when he was writing a Game of Thrones, a lot of it was like he was not very unsure how he would approach the world, and he very much was like, do I do the more hidden sci-fi? Are the dragons literal? Are the like dragons were, I think, always going to be part of the story, but it was never like, are the dragons going to be literally dragons, like living flesh and blood? Are they going to be some sort of telepathic, telekinetic expression of Daenerys' power? Are they going to be more mechanical? He didn't go into detail what it was going to be. It was just literal dragons versus metaphorical dragons. And that's a bit more my speculation there. And it's from this author, Phyllis Eisenstein, who convinced him to have the literal dragons in the story. But in that same interview, I think it's the same interview there, I believe, he also goes on to give Phyllis Eisenstein's book as an example of how, fantasy and sci-fi, even despite being more like furniture, they're not really mutually exclusive. Because she talks about her main, the Tales of Alaric the Minstrel, which, it's a fantasy story. It's about a wandering minstrel who goes and sings around in the medieval world, sure. But the guy can teleport, and it's very much treated like as in a teleportation in the sort of more science fiction-y comic book way, as opposed to magic.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't one of Michael Moorcock's books, doesn't Alaric fight with the elves and they eventually uncover like the ancient technology of like fucking tanks or something like that, and that's like one of the plot points of one of his books? Or am I mixing that up with something else?
It's been a while since I've read Moorcock, honestly.
Yeah, I never did. It was just conveyed to me. Stories were conveyed to me, and one of the ones that I remember being conveyed to me was that Alaric, or
that's Elric.
Elric. And Elric, it basically is, I want to say it's elves, but he's fighting with somebody, and there's like a forbidden secret ancient technology or some shit like that, or some hidden thing, some power. And the power ends up being like war machines, like from like wars, like in our time, And so I would say that's a great blending of those concepts. And kind of shows.
It's like when people interpret the Book of Revelation to try to like make it fit modern terms. There's something in there about like insects that will like sting you from their tail. And some pastor quite seriously from a pulpit said that was a metaphor for an attack helicopter. Yeah. It's I just like shit like that.
Drones. If you're watching warfare right now, drones. You could reinterpret that all kinds of Bible ways, right? It's always possible to pull interesting
locusts. Drones are locusts.
Yeah, same. It's like the drone swarms. Well, who knows? And then of course, if you lived in any times of great famines, they were obviously like real locusts.
Dude, being on a real battlefield right now would be terrifying if you've seen any of the drone footage. Holy crap, man.
It's not fun. It's not
fun.
That is real wizardry. But so it's almost in fire though. There have been, so just to drag technology into this though, there have been claims again from the Jacob School that, for example, Storm's End might have been an ancient power plant or hydroelectric dam or some shit like that. So there's theory like that of the idea that perhaps there was even high technology in Westeros at some point. I don't know if I go that far, but I think it's interesting.
Like a Baghdad battery.
Yeah, it's an interesting thought.
The long night is a nuclear winter, sort of.
Yeah. I wish we had Mini Minuteman here to argue that point. No, I don't know if he watches.
We were
I would love to have
I would
Milo
love that,
Rossi.
though, right?
I would love Milo Rossi on this show.
No,
we were
that's
just
not- that's not
discussing
what
in
I'm
the
trying to-
Discord the old blurbs that came
Yeah.
out for this book for a Game of Thrones before it was first released, and it sounds like it's taking place in the future, on a future Earth where the seasons have all been messed up for some reason. But then the question is,
theories about the seasons in Westeros that are like scientific.
but the question then is like, who wrote the blurb? Did any of that come from George? Did somebody read it and just decide that that's what was going on? Like that sort of thing.
It's really unsure because like George is kind of, as far as I know, but I'm not very knowledgeable on the blurbs in particular. But as far as I've seen, he kind of goes back and forth on this, on whether he wrote them or not, like George. So it's kind of unsure of if any or all of those were him.
We just don't know. We're just not sure.
He's screwing with us.
He is screwing with us, I feel. I mean, have you seen this fandom? I think sometimes the wait for the book is just to screw with us to see how insane he gets.
Theory of Ice and Fire.
Some fantasy nerd broke his heart, and this has been his revenge. He spent his whole life plotting and executing his revenge.
Being a writer. He spent his whole life being a writer. No,
waiting for that person to die before he publishes the final friggin' book.
So really quick, Theory of Ice and Fire, the mixing of sci-fi and fantasy. George does like that a lot, though. You should check out the wild cards, which he edited. Which he's not writing for them, but he contributes a lot. I would say, because they're all his friends. It started, I think, as a role play between him and his friends, and he's been the editor forever. And he, like I said, there's a lot of stuff I would argue he draws from the wild cards, and so. George seems to like the idea of the blending of them, which is it's a weird way of thinking about George. We all think of him more as like a dragons kind of, pervy old man, but like
he has said that he doesn't like
more of like a superheroes and dragons pervy old man. Like he's not just that simple. We're blocking him in to like this really narrow category when we think of him as a fantasy writer, because it's like he didn't spend the most of his life doing that.
He has said that he doesn't like a sci-fi explanation for the seasons on Westeros.
I have heard that too, yeah.
Yeah, but other than that,
that's from an interview where there was a very explicit question of how are the seasons working? Like there is like this sci-fi explanation. By the way, I think the interviewer pulled that from one of his own stories where he actually gave the sci-fi explanation.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. He does a lot
George
of,
already came up with it.
He does a lot of bullshitting. He does a lot of bullshitting, in my opinion, because he doesn't want to give it away, and there are many questions that are asked that it would simply be a giveaway to answer them correctly.
I would be more cautious with that because a lot of the time he deflects by saying that would be telling, or
that's what I mean. He does a lot of
later on.
He does a lot of bullshitting. I don't mean he's always lying. I mean a lot of times he's deflecting or walking away or fucking answering the question with a half answer. Like the man just tries not to reveal at least to a certain degree.
Yeah. To me, it's like. Again, George doesn't like to necessarily think even in these terms, although when pressed, he will say he's more of a science fiction guy because that is what he spent most of his career writing.
Yeah, and I think, though, to talk about what we were talking about earlier, I think he likes to break down the barrier. So to Theory of Ice and Fire, the blending of fantasy and comics and sci-fi concepts are wrapped into fantasy. I think George, again, views it all as more of like a flat plane, like it's all the same thing. It's just kind of a matter of how you're dressing it up. And if you think about it, we talked about Invincible way a long time ago at the beginning of the thing. That's kind of how shit like that works. Like in that, you would find people who like are more or less, if you only knew their story, like a fantasy setting. And you'd find people who, if you only knew their story, were like a non-fantasy setting. Like, but they're all together in the same thing, And there's a lot of stuff that's kind of like that. Marvel's kind of like that to a degree. I mean, like there's quite a bit they blend it all together. It's a little bit of everything. Because it's kind of as all comes from one sort of place. It just what he's saying about the furniture earlier, it is kind of how you could mix and match your furniture, because it's all about what you're just dressing up as.
Now, how it affects this story regarding magic is because a lot of the times I've gone back and compared feats of magic to some sort of the more science fiction concepts that George has used before in his earlier writing. Now, many of these are much more simple to respond to. The warging / skin changing. People say warging, but warging is specific to wolves in the universe. Skin changing. That's just your consciousness jumping body.
I thought wargs was working I thought wargs could work.
No,
animals.
no. Warging is the specific action of skin changing a wolf.
Really? It's what about no? But they call the boar skin changer a warg. Isn't it called a warg too?
No, Borok is not called a warg. I don't think.
Really?
I might be wrong. But...
No, you might be right. I don't know. I thought warging was to skin change into an animal. I thought they were more or less interchangeable terms. So you could be right. Warging could be a wolf. I don't know.
Not all skin changes are wargs.
Rage Unicorn says warg is a wolf. So yeah, wargs might be wolf.
I remember when I read up on that, and I was surprised because the show makes no distinction. I don't think the show even mentions skin changers, just wargs. So I had assumed that they were the same thing as well until I went and read up on it. But it's interesting that that's different. I'm not entirely sure why it would be.
Anyway, yeah, I don't know. I think it's only mainly because the term warg comes from a term for wolf in the story, in history, and I think it's from Norse mythology. And warg is specifically tied to wolves, and that's why. Rig, I'm not sure where it's from.
It's okay.
Where I want to go back to this is there's stuff that you can very much explain it more. Skin changing is just some sort of telepathic jumping of the body, or bond between dragon rider and dragon is also some sort of telepathic link, even if unconscious. But then you have the more explicit stuff, one of the examples given, obviously, is the whole, what's it called? The shadow babies, plural, because it happens twice. And people are usually okay, so yes, I buy the skin changing stuff and the dragon riding stuff as some sort of, something explainable by sci-fi, but how do you explain the shadow babies? And to that, I usually point. To be clear, I don't necessarily think this is hidden sci-fi. I just don't think you should. I think you should approach the magic in A Song of Ice and Fire more as how George approaches it in sci-fi. How George approaches sci-fi stuff. Shadow Babies are a ripoff from George's favorite movie, which is a sci-fi movie. It's called Forbidden Planet.
So really quick here, Christy is asking, isn't Warging what Bran does when he goes into Ravens? This is also what I thought, but
yeah,
again, I think that classifies as skin changing.
Oh, and then also Duke says that Warging is Irish, I believe. So
yeah, I to be fair, I'm not sure where it's from. I know.
Well, here's how we could solve this.
I don't want to skip past the mention of Forbidden Planet. Just.
We could go back to Forbidden Planet, but if anyone in the chat can actually put a quote in the chat that says that warging is for something either exclusively for wolves or not exclusively for wolves, I would be happy to see that. I just don't want to pull up the books in front of me right now. But Forbidden Planet, go ahead, Rust. What do you want to talk about Forbidden Planet? I have not seen it as far as I recall. Maybe I saw it a long time ago. But...
Oh my goodness!
Oh my God.
I'm confused. I'm not sure what to tell you and what not to tell you about it.
I'm very media illiterate,
It's considered. Do you like Star Trek? Are you into Star Trek?
I love the Trek, except some of the newer ones. I like some of the
it's considered.
I don't like some of the new stuff.
It's considered one of the main inspirations for Star Trek. It was MGM's first big sci-fi film. Have you seen Mystery Science Theater 3000, the movie?
No,
where they do this. Okay, so when they do their so they cover when they do their movie, it's This Island Earth, which was the first big sci-fi. This was MGM's response to that, It was like the MGM's first big budget sci-fi film. It's an excellent film. It's dated, so it comes with the content warnings of the way they talk about women and stuff like that. But other than that, I don't want to tell you much more. You should watch it, and if you want someone to watch it with you, there's probably tons of people in the server who would be down for a watch party on that. It's a great movie.
I'd be down to watch sometime. I'm curious. I do like watching old sci-fi. I took a sci-fi class one time. We watched a bunch of old.
Like there are parts that I'm intentionally not telling you that you're gonna love.
Yeah, I mean, I think Forbidden Planet was on one of the optional ones we could have read about in that class, but I just never seen it. Do we got anything else we want to say about teaking or magicking in the Martinverse? Oh, also, sorry, one more last thing. Christy said she looked it up, and Bran wargs into ravens.
I would have to look that up.
I'm curious. I'm curious. I think maybe it's not wolves. I don't know.
I mean, it definitely is with wolves because I just googled it. I
guess it was whether it's exclusively wolves was the question. But
all right. So the first thing that comes up here, it says a warg is a type of skin changer.
Oh,
so it's a specific type of skin changer who is bonded to a wolf. Dogs might possibly count as well. All tales agree that most common skin changers were men who controlled wolves, even dire wolves, and these had a special name among the wildlings, wargs. So I think it's just like that. The skin changers were most often using wolves, so they came up with the word for that, and that became kind of the wild word for it. And then skin changer is sort of more the like word that the maesters made up. To describe this sort of thing. That's my idea. But so as far as the people north of the wall are concerned, warging is warging, no matter what the animal is. But then you've got the nerds who are like, well, it's technically a type of warging or a type of skin changing.
Yeah, probably. It sounds like us, honestly.
Exactly. That's what I meant. Yeah.
But also, I did look it up while we were here, and the term warg was reconstructed by Tolkien for his series from the Old Norse of vargr, which is just the word for wolf. And it refers to specifically like Fenrir, like the Fenris wolf. It's specifically.
I'm sorry, that was from which language?
Old Norse.
Old Norse, okay.
Yeah, not New Norse, Old Norse.
But yeah, again, magic, like as far as a lot of the magic is described in Song of Ice and Fire, I don't think it's described in a way where it's impossible to come up with some sort of science fiction explanation for it. And I do think that's how George approaches it, just because he has written so many stories in which it's a science fiction story, but these people have these supernatural comic book-esque powers.
Yeah.
So in that sense,
what about gods? So we got a lot of opinions about gods, both to you guys and then also to chat. What's the thoughts on gods? I tend to be an anti-existence of gods person, but a lot of people really love the gods. They just think that the gods are, maybe some of them are real, maybe all of them are real. I've heard quite a few things. So what's everybody's thoughts?
Personally,
thoughts on which part?
on gods, like if they exist or not, and if they do exist, who exists? Because I've heard both. So, yeah, do you want to go, Rusty? Do you want to tell us God talk?
Andy
can go ahead, and I'll be back in a second.
All right. Okay. As far as I'm concerned, gods aren't real. And again, this is just me. Again, this is very, very much the lens I come from when it comes to A Song of Ice and Fire, which is I've read a lot of old Germ shit way before I ever read A Song of Ice and Fire. I started off with Dying of the Light, to make the record clear. And in all of those stories, and in quite I would just cite The Way of Cross and Dragon. In a lot of these, George kind of like is never focused on god characters per se, and again, the Way of Cross and Dragon kind of rejects the idea of deities existing. Now, of course, George doesn't necessarily repeat himself always, but he likes to bring in a lot of themes, and I don't know. To me, a lot of the theories going around about, the Great Other and R'hllor, it's like this final apocalyptic showdown. It just kind of detracts from the whole George mantra of the heart in conflict with itself and the whole human aspect of the story. Now, I do think there's gods of sorts, as a theory of Ice and Fire just said, but I don't necessarily agree with like all of what he's saying. I'm just like, but
yeah, cosmic horrors. I'm a little bit shaky on, but all the other ones, I'm like, these are all either provable or easily within the wheelhouse of George.
Yes, like I do think what classifies as a god is like what classifies as sci-fi versus fantasy is much more of a rigid structure that we the fans follow as much as George follows. Because what's the difference between Bloodraven and a god? Because Bloodraven also has these supernatural powers that can influence a lot.
I would say, what's the difference between Bloodraven and a superhero? See, I would say, what's the difference between Bloodraven and a superhero, right? And a superhero, right? Because like he has crazy power, but I'm like, is he a god, right? Is he? I don't know. Or at least this is why, again, the cosmic horror thing is like that strikes me on huge levels. Like I'm not a massive Lovecraft fan, but I remember like the Hounds of Tindalos, and that's like a scary story, right? It's not Lovecraft, but a scary story. And like the Hounds of Tindalos are on a fucking different level than like anything we see in the Song of Ice and Fire, right? That's
a George Martin?
No, the Hounds of Tindalos is just some whack ass old fucking sci-fi story. It's really cool though. If you ever get a chance, like look up on the internet. There's like readings of it, like old radio broadcasts. That shit, it's fucking good.
Give me the name one more time.
The Hounds of Tindalos.
It's by one of Lovecraft's,
I mean,
friends.
Fair warning, it might be weird, like it's written in a long ass time ago, but I remember it being a pretty fucking interesting story. So like a lot of that stuff's like judge it in the time period it was produced in. But
I've got it, got it in my TBR.
It's the Hounds of Tindalos are are something that is mentioned in a Lovecraft story, but it first comes from one of his good friends, Frank Belknap Long, who was also one of the writers that was writing in that whole pulp sci-fi Lovecraft mythos kind of era. It's that same circle of authors that wrote the whole Lovecraft mythos, like Lovecraft himself, obviously, Derleth, Long, to some extent, Robert E. Howard. Also,
so since Theory of Ice and Fire is already just kind of pushing us this direction, eventually we're gonna have to talk to Euron. Talk about Euron. Also, thank you, Carpe Noctem. I'm also glad that we're still streaming, because it seems like this is a much more stable platform, and I'm trying to do it on the weekends periodically. Now. So but we're also very glad to be here. Thank you guys for showing up and joining the stream. But yeah, back to Euron.
Just to be clear, Carpe did not thank us for streaming. He thanked us, or they thanked us for steaming.
No.
Which takes considerably more effort.
I'm actually.
You are very welcome that I showed up steaming today. I happen to live in South Florida, so it's 85 degrees and something like 78% humidity. So I'm steaming. I don't know about the rest of these guys.
Right now,
they don't have their cameras on.
I'm freezing. That's where I'm at. It's cold where I'm at right now. But
no, it's cold here as well. Don't you worry. But I don't necessarily. I know Lovecraft is very much because there's a lot of Lovecraft allusions that George has incorporated into the story, particularly since The World of Ice and Fire came out.
You do know that I wasn't making fun of you, right? Sorry, I thought my mic was on mute.
It's fine. Don't you worry.
Voice to text.
Okay.
All right. Now, what I was trying to say is like it's been like Lovecraft theories about the eldritch cosmic horror have been kind of coming in ever since we got the World of Ice and Fire, because the oily black stone stuff kind of just propelled it into existence. I would say don't put so much stock in the World of Ice and Fire. It's we don't even know how much of it is George and how much of it is Elio and Linda coming up with stuff and George just giving the okay. First of all,
I would say
wait.
Probably quite a
Who?
bit of it is modified stuff.
Who and Linda?
Elio and Linda are the people who
Elio
work with
and
him.
Linda.
Or Elio and Linda work with him on the book for the
Okay.
for and they work with him on a lot of stuff apparently. But the point being is that it apparently from things that I'd heard about how the book was constructed, a lot of it was them taking notes that he had and modifying them and stuff like that, and him like adding to things that the other. So it seems like there was quite a bit of cooperation. So it's not a whole Martin product. It's not that it's not cool. It's just that a lot of it's stuff that it was kind of co-constructed.
I think that's kind of how the Quran got written, isn't it?
I honestly don't know enough to say.
I would rather not start a religious debate on stream.
Yeah,
so
I just
shy away from that.
My understanding
quickly.
of how the Bible or the Quran or the Torah, any of the religious books were constructed is like very non-existent. I don't know too much about it, so
I know some of it regarding the Bible, but like
it's probably a long talk, though, right?
it is a long talk, and we don't have the time to get into it. But I was going to say that cosmic horror is something that George has liked a lot and has read and referenced, but it's not so much something he has
concrete or anything in the story. Yeah,
has he ever written in that sort of sense. It's something that he's a fan of, but I've never seen an element. Like, I've seen some elements of it, sure, but it's not proper cosmic horror, that I would argue personally. Now, or at least not in the Lovecraftian way, which, to be fair, makes sense.
Quick, to Sentient Blueberry Muffin, I think that George does care about systems, but that said, I think that that's actually kind of strong evidence that he's still relying on the old fallback. He's breaking out old reliable yet again, which is the exact same way he's handled genetic synthetic previously. In prior.
My dog would very much like me to take her out. As penance, I'm going to show her to you first. Come here. Come on. Hop up.
Okay. Let's see here.
Come here.
We'll judge the pup.
There you go.
Look at that pup.
Hi, baby.
Aww.
Hi, baby. Yeah, she's 11. She needs to go take a tinkle.
Yeah, no worries.
Okay, take her.
All right, we'll be right back.
We'll hold the fort down.
Yeah. Sure.
To continue on what we were saying, I think that I think that Martin busts out unreliable. He goes for ways that he's worked with and done the systems and stuff before. So to Sentient Blueberry Muffin, I think he does care. I just think that that's evidence that he's not trying to construct something that's like a magic system in the way that we might think about it in other senses. I think he's kind of just doing old reliable, and then he's not giving you any hints so that your imagination can kind of run wild with it. And because and maybe this is just an assumption, I would feel like he probably has a thought in his mind about what's occurring, but I don't know that he cares if the reader totally knows.
Yeah, I would agree. Now, there is obviously an element, I think, that there is a system. I think one of the clues that there is a system is partially the whole, hilt without a sword, magic has its cost, and the whole emphasis on blood magic. Now, blood magic it's a bit complicated with how blood works. I'm not sure I fully figured it out myself.
So you don't buy into the power of belief thing. That to me made a lot of sense.
It does make sense.
Where it's not really about the blood, it's really more about the belief.
Sure. I do think that there is an element of truth to the power of blood,
Yeah,
But
you
I'm
think
not
there's
sure if
something
it's
in
what
it.
the people believe blood buys
Yeah.
magic,
But like
or
don't get me wrong,
whether
don't get me
it's
wrong.
just much more the literal sense.
I think that there is power of blood in the sense that certain people definitely have like the power to become a warg, and that seems to be a genetically passed on ability. But I when it comes to the magic out of the blood, because we oftentimes can get the same effects out of anybody's blood, to me I'm like, it makes me wonder if the blood is really the secret ingredient, or if the ingredient is more of the belief that the blood is important being the secret. And again, that's the Jacob school. This is the Jacob school of thinking about this, which I just happen to like that way of thinking about it.
Now, as far as I mean, I'm not gonna say that I'm like fully like here. Like I'm not exactly sure of how it works, or because I don't think we've been given enough hints to fully say concretely one way or the other
Yeah.
within the story itself. Yeah, a lot of it is based on conjecture, such as what could work, what he has written before.
So
Which
really,
is what I lean on heavily personally.
one more interjection really fast. A Theory of Ice and Fire. Your thought is based on Nyarlathotep in the Lovecraft poem, who's the herald of cosmic horrors and destroys cities and brings winter. But I don't know if the great other cosmic horror, dead necromancer, Night's King, is sending him the visions or influencing him. So this brings up an interesting point, and I do want to talk about this. So there's two ways to look at Euron. That's why I said eventually we're going to have to come back to Euron. So I wanted to talk about that because a Theory of Ice and Fire brought that up earlier. Euron either is communicating with some kind of actual deity or pseudo deity, or he is not, and he is crazy. and so I find this to be interesting. And then the question of if he's communicating with somebody would be who is it and are they a god? ? And along the same line of thought of can there be gods ? So I don't know if you want to tackle any of that, but we could kick that around for a second while Rust is still away.
If there are, I don't think there's like personally what conclusions I've come to regarding gods is I don't think there's gods in the traditional sense of, a god is a being above human. I think if you're anything, Euron to me, and that's mainly because I subscribe quite a lot to Euron Greyjoy. And related ideas. I think Euron as a person is the kind of failed apprentice sort of type. He was one of those people that Bloodraven considered for the whole, come to me back north so we can save the world scheme. And he was considered, he was shown some power, but then rejected because he was objectively a bad person, and he kind of got driven mad by that. Now you could argue that then Bloodraven takes the, Bloodraven kind of takes the place of a cosmic entity that drives someone mad, in the Lovecraftian sense. But I don't think there's these cosmic entities that are inhuman in the sense of gods.
Yeah, I think the inspiration is there. I think the inspiration is there for sure, but I don't think the cosmic horror in the Lovecraftian sense is there. So really quick to talk about sentient blueberry muffin ideas on the visions on the mother in Davos 1 in Storm of Swords. This is where he is on the island, right? Or this is where he is watching the statues burn. Where is this vision taking place? Because if it's the one where he's on the island, he is clearly hallucinating from dehydration. But if it's a different time, I don't know. We can talk about that. Really,
he is on the he is not on an island. He is on.
Well, it's a very small. It's a very small rock. He's on a little fucking rock, basically.
He's on a very like a tidal reef that kind of appears out of the fucking island, but like basically. Or an islet, more like.
Yeah, so
the Spears of the Merlin King.
Yeah, Spears of the Merlin King. He's been sailed out under the chain, and he has, number one, been drowned. So I'm not going to say brain damage, but I'm going to say traumatic event. That's for sure. And then he also is again starving and dehydrated, and he's suffering from exposure to the elements. And these are all things that make you trip out. And what's interesting, because you say Jamie gets similar visions, it turns out that in our world, a lot of people think they see Jesus or similar other figures of the religious variety, and even though these people have never met each other, so whether you believe in Jesus or not, we believe in gods or not, you could easily make the argument that these people just share common belief structures, just share common, things that their mind is gravitating to because they believe common things. And so I'm like, you could make either argument, but the argument I would make is that, because like I said, I'm real world atheist. And if somebody comes to me and they said I had a hallucination when I was out in the woods starving to death, and then I saw Jesus, I'd be like, question mark. But that would not be out of line with actual real stuff, right? You know what I mean? Like during the Crusades and stuff, they claim to dig up a holy spear, and a lot of people at the time even don't believe it. But there's many claims made, and so like I don't think that stuff like that is out of the ordinary in a book where he's trying to mimic semblances of real world people and real world religion. But I hear what you guys have to say about that. Like, I don't know, what would you guys have to say about the visions of Davos? Are they real? Are they not real? Is the mother talking to him?
Well, I never got the chance to answer whether or not I thought the gods existed.
Yeah, go ahead. Answer the gods first, and then you can talk about the Davos visions. Do you think the gods are talking to Davos, right? You know?
It depends entirely on what your definition of a god is. Do I think that there is some sort of all-powerful creator god? There may have been in the past. That may be where, this whole thing started. But if there was, there isn't one actively participating now. I do believe there are certain creatures. I don't know if that's the right term. There's an intelligence that's using either magic or technology to appear godlike. And at what point do you draw the line, right? If someone can snap their fingers and do godlike things, they might as well be a god. I've been watching a lot of Stargate recently, so it's that idea comes up a lot. So they could be like fourth dimensional beings that are occasionally projecting into our reality to screw with us. It could be, but I think it's mostly, I think some of these gods exist, or at least some of the demons exist or something, because we see their effects. If the seven ever existed, I think they're gone. They seem to have no power whatsoever. So if there was something that was pretending to be this, the seven at some point, they're long gone, or they changed their tactics or something. As far as the religion of the old men, see, when they say the old gods, I mean, what gods are they even really talking about? Did they have named gods?
The spirits of the children of the forest and the green seers. They describe them explicitly as nameless gods. At least Catelyn does. Blueberry Muffin, though, I think people tap into stuff in the series when they're altered mental states, drugs, sick, tired. I'm not going to disagree with you. I just don't think that every time we see something that's happening. I think that certain times it is. And I think that there's certain indicators about that. But
it's muddled as hell.
Yeah, I don't know that the Davos one is him having a real relationship with an actual god figure. And he is close to the king. I mean, that's true, but like it would be very difficult, I think, to ID him and then choose to influence him. Bloodraven could maybe do it. So like you could make the argument that Bloodraven, with his magic CIA powers, could just like fucking like he is known to watch everybody and know everything. This is what he's known for. He is a super surveillance network. Himself is that thing. So like you could make the argument that he wants to keep eyes on Stannis and wants to influence his actions, and so he acts through the vessel of Davos, because Davos is receptive to green shit or whatever. I mean, I'd hear the argument. I haven't seen it. I haven't thought about that. I don't know. So like to me, I'm like I wasn't thinking that direction, but
I wasn't saying Bloodraven.
No. I was just addressing what Blueberry said. So I'm like, I think that sometimes it's happening. I think it's happening. Like when Jaime sleeps in the Weirwood stump, I think it's happening. When Jaime puts his head in the Weirwood stump and sleeps on it, I think it's happening that time. But I don't know that it's happening with Davos, so I'm like, it's a big question mark for me. Would be what I would say. But I agree that people do get hit with shit when they're in altered mental states. I think it happens sometimes, particularly like Dany with drinking the stuff at the House of the Undying, right? Doesn't she drink something, right?
Yeah, she drinks Shade of the Evening.
Yeah, she drinks Shade of the Evening.
So I think that there are at least two real powerful beings out there. Whether they're actually fighting each other or not, I don't know. They might be working together and creating this us versus them mentality in order to maintain their own power. I'm not entirely sure. I think something supernatural is going on, and I think that whatever gods might be left behind, I think there may have been more gods in the past, but whatever gods are left behind are simply taking advantage of the fact that they know how to use that magic. They're not the sources of that magic.
Okay. So they're more like demigods or something like that. So
kind of parasitical.
Yeah, Rust is kind of on the god train, just in a different sense than sort of benevolent, all-powerful gods. And me and Andre,
they're opportunistic.
Andy are kind of on the no gods trains. That's kind of how we fall currently.
I mean, I also kind of am like, there are definitely beings who could be called gods. I just don't. They're not gods in the sense of, like inhuman in the sense of higher divine being.
Yeah, exactly. You could call Bloodraven a god, but like
what do you call
I wouldn't call him a
god. What do you call?
Hence my qualifier that it depends on what you call a god. So
yeah,
like what is the Weirwood net if not a god?
I call Bloodraven a nerd. I call the Weirwood net an interesting nerd club. Zoom. All right, no, I'm just kidding. All right, so
wrap it up.
We gotta clip that.
Yeah, wrap it up. All right, so moving on though to other topics. Do we want to segue from Euron to other examples of?
I mean, I would argue
hyper debatable around gods. Are there any other hyper debatable things where like maybe this person really is getting something from somewhere other than Bloodraven?
I mean, there's arguments to be made that anyone with a glass candle, the glass candles have this ability to allow communication from afar and even enter people's minds and thus can influence stuff in that sort of way.
And their dreams, yeah.
And their dreams, I mean, they are obviously a way of manipulating people and the story. And arguably, I think I'm actually misremembering what exactly the change was from the feast drafts that we found in the Cushing Library. But there was a mention that they could bring back life, I think, in the drafts. There was much more of a thing with the glass candles back then. So the glass candles might have even more big functions that could allow one to act as a god, even if you're like not necessarily born with, what Bloodraven has, which is the genetic predisposition for green seeing / skin changing, which led him to, become a sort of god. But what I was going to say, because I wanted to go on Euron, I think, speaking of gods, I think what Euron is trying to do in the story, yes, exactly. Thank you, Redist. You're right. They could make you immortal as long as your glass candle is lit. I think that's fascinating. It is fascinating.
Whoa. That ties right into that Star Trek episode where Crusher was banging a ghost.
Okay.
We have crossover.
We have a crossover. But what I was
you've both seen that. You both know what I'm talking about, right?
No, I have not.
I can't remember the plot other than the ghost banging, to be quite honest.
I have not been part of the Trek fandom.
Season 7 of TNG gets weird, man.
Yeah, season 1 and 7 have some high points of weird, and then there's some other points of weird throughout the series, but there's some high points in season 1 and season 7. But I also don't remember it well enough, so you'd have to tell me the plot of it and how it crosses over. His ghost is contained in a vessel, right? That is what the glass candle is, I'm presuming. What's going on?
You want me to explain the Star Trek episode?
Yeah, go for it. Run it for us.
Oh, I'm happy to. I just didn't want to take up time on your stream if that wasn't cool. So, okay. So, yeah, it's...
I love Star Trek, so cross it over. I want to hear the crossover.
So, the whole Enterprise goes to, I don't know if it's a moon or a planet or something, but where her aunt or grandmother has just passed away, for Bev Crusher. Bev Crusher's aunt or family member has just passed away. And Bev Crusher is talking to Deanna Troi, the counselor on the ship. She's been reading her grandmother's diaries, and they're like particularly erotic, and they keep mentioning this one man named Ronan. Okay. And so eventually this Ronan fellow shows up, and he keeps insisting that she light this candle. And it turns out he's some sort of parasitic energy life being that needs this candle, but also needs a human host. And so it's been occupying the bodies of Howard women for generations.
Look it up. Who writes?
It's called Sub Rosa.
Yeah, look it up. Who writes the episode? What's the name of the writers?
Oh, it's probably going to be Berman.
Is it Berman? Did Berman really write it?
That sounds like a Rick Berman type episode. But the name of the episode is Sub Rosa.
Yeah, I just know. Apparently, I think it was Snodgrass, and then she wrote like an episode or a couple episodes, an episode or two for TNG. He used to hang out with her. He hung out with some of the Trek writers.
Oh, Snodgrass is the co-editor of Wildcards.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. There's people who have had a spot on TNG Trek in the writing. He never wrote for them himself, but he hangs out with people who had a spot in the writing. So he knows the series well. He knows people who hang out in that circle. So that connection explicitly, I'm not sure if it's guaranteed, but that connection would not surprise me if it's actually him pulling little bits of influence, or vice versa, right? Could be the other way around, because season 7 is quite late on. It could be that one of those writers is pulling little bits of influence or having read Martin,
Brannon Braga wrote the episode.
That's the teleplay. The story is apparently by Jerry Taylor and Gina Gallo.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I just didn't know if it was someone had something to do with Martin or someone around his similar circles, because he knows a lot of writers. So I'm like, if there's someone who runs in his writing circle, that could easily be, influence one way or the other.
It's probably someone it's probably that obviously he's a Trekkie, but
listen, I only remember Snodgrass. I just remember that he was friends with people who had a writing spot on TNG. Not like they were writing every episode, but they had a spot or whatever.
He's probably quite quite full, quite friendly with a lot of writers in a lot of TV shows. Again, George was very active in Hollywood.
Yeah, he wrote for television. He wrote for television, so he
wrote for the Twilight Zone. Let's not try to make it out like George didn't have connections in the highest ranking TV stuff in Hollywood. But no, he has the connections.
That's what I'm saying. If there's similarity to TNG, that to me is it could be accidental, also could be intentional.
No, but what I was gonna say about Euron before we kind of veered off into Star Trek stuff. I think a lot of what Euron is trying to achieve is apotheosis. He is trying to become a god. In the sense that Bloodraven is.
Yeah, I would lean towards that. I think he's going kind of for the the god on Earth kind of, kind of sort of thing.
I mean, his whole shtick in The Forsaken. I'm sorry, I think everyone here who watches us.
No, it's okay. I did a Forsaken reading on my channel. Most people have probably been exposed to it. So, spoiler alert: there will be talk of stuff that occurs in the sample chapters.
Yeah, in the sample chapter, it's basically. One could argue that all the visions that our good friend. What's his name? Aaron has is psychotropic drugs, or as it's more commonly known.
I think it's a combination of both. I think it's what Sentient Blueberry was talking about earlier. It's somebody being given a substance, Shade of the Evening, and then someone else is entering their mind. Euron, entering his mind, giving him a little bit of mind assault, which kind of mirrors the other assault that occurs. Because he's a horrible asshole. But yeah, I think that's a parallel intentionally. I think he is mind assaulting him in a direct parallel to how he would assault him in other ways when he was a kid. And then I think that is the Shade of the Evening makes him susceptible to basically the mental attack. I think it opens his mind up and makes him able to be mentally attacked. Like how someone could mentally attack Bloodraven could mentally attack somebody who was vulnerable, or Bran mentally attacks Hodor. I think that's what it's like. I don't think it's as the same way as Bran is attacking Hodor. I think it's like how the candle or how Bloodraven gets into your dreams. You know.
To get into, I'm gonna say Sentient Blueberry Muffin also hit the road again in chat and they really hit it on the head. Martin is definitely into 60s New Age hippie stuff.
Yeah.
He wrote Armageddon Rag. I rest my case.
Yeah.
But and about Finity, the timey-wimey-limey, they wrote about the Westeros planet name, which I want to quickly address. We don't know. Planetos is a fan name.
Yeah, Planetos.
George never bothers to give
George has, as far as I know, George has never given us a name, and he used to name lots of planets, like some of the Avalon, the book that was not published, The Thousand Worlds, was a planet, right? It was Avalon, right? Wasn't it?
Yes, it is Avalon.
Okay, yeah. Sorry, I didn't know if I was mixing that up, but there was an unpublished work, and it's named after a planet that we have heard about a bunch of times, but have never been to yet. As far as I recall, we'd never been to Avalon, right? You can correct me if I'm wrong, Carmen. That's not happened, yeah?
No, we get flashbacks to Avalon in Dying of the Light, but that's
but we've never had a story on Avalon.
And we hear about Avalon a lot.
Yeah, but we've never had a story there.
But it's not a place we see.
Avalon is kind of I don't want to say it's kind of the magnum opus of the Thousand Worlds, but it's kind of like a big tie-in piece. I want to say it's one where I feel like many threads would come together that would connect many stories, you know, in theory. Maybe not. Maybe I'm over imagining it, but I feel like he might have been.
I would love to see
whatever
he had already written of Avalon.
Yeah, I feel like it would have been a proto Ice and Fire in terms of the tying things together. I think it would have been told like one of his other Thousand Worlds stories, but I think there would have been a lot of bridging of gap, you know.
But yeah, a lot of gods in this story, I think, are more not necessarily human, but like mortal beings? Depending on how you want to classify others and or the children of the forest and or whatever other species exist in the universe of A Song of Ice and Fire, or on the planet on which A Song of Ice and Fire is set on, etc. It's kind of complicated to say. For example, I think it's quite explicit, but obviously not fully confirmed, but it's quite explicit to me in how Bran 3, A Dance with Dragons, kind of where Bloodraven explains the Weirwood net, as we are wont to call it, that there's like which is the souls of millions of children of the forest just living on in
it's basically like if you had to live in Facebook, it'd be fucking hell, and that's why they hate humanity. They're just vengeful spirit. No, I'm just kidding.
If those are not like, you know, the old gods, I don't know what it is.
George likes hive minds. The green dreams and the long, slow thoughts and all of those descriptions are actually ripped almost verbatim, actually literally verbatim in some instances, from a Tough Voyaging book from the Tough Voyaging series, where he talks about a race of beings that live inside of a interconnected telepathic net. And so, like, I imagine that he has pretty positive feeling. I mean, the Grishka, you probably know even more of these stories than I remember, but there's
a lot of
telepathic. Seems to have some pretty positive thoughts on the idea of the shared mental consciousness thing going on. I don't know if we've run too far away from Rust. Rust, when you're done with your message, do you got anything that you want to pitch to us? That's also along the same kind of gods topic, you know, outside of Euron or along Euron. Did you have any other comments? I didn't want to run too far away on these other books and shit.
I just am waiting for the reveal as to whether Euron actually has some connection with some god or if he's just insane.
Yeah, this is exactly my question, right?
To be fair,
what if he just gets his ass eaten by a kraken?
Right.
Wait, I think a theory of Ice and Fire is right that Nightflyer starts on Avalon. I remembered it starting on New Home, but I think now that I remember it, it starts in
I thought it
Avalon.
started in a fucking space station where they were docking to get on the ship, but maybe I'm wrong. It's been a long time. I have to go back and reread it. So I will go back and reread Nightflyer at some point. Theory of Ice and Fire.
No, what I remembered it was starting in New Home, but no, the ship is from New Home. Theory of Ice and Fire is right here. Anyway, where was I going? I was gonna say something. Oh yes, the answer to you, at least the answer I think is right to your question, Rust, is Borkinolo's dose. He is insane and has had some sort of contact with a quote-unquote god.
Ah, okay.
In this very like funnily enough, in this very he grew insane because he had contact with this cosmic eldritch abomination, but it's not really a cosmic eldritch abomination. It's just a human, or a sentient mortal.
Yeah, this is the other way of thinking about Euron is that he's actually had some kind of contact and it made him insane. I think that's one I've heard before, that Bloodraven accidentally broke his mind.
Yeah, that's one that I've also heard. Yeah,
it wasn't intentional. It didn't mean to jack him up, but it did.
But
also heard that Valeria broke his mind, or something he found broke his mind.
Yeah, but as far as I don't know, I've kind of always said there was a comment earlier and I've wanted to address it, but then we got into something. There was this comment about how the Red God, which is also one of the things that a lot of fans used to be like, but there's power from the fire. Surely there must be something.
Yeah.
And I'm like, personally, I don't think Valor is real.
Yeah, I don't think so either. That's and I think that people get way too invested. They kind of like to pick a god, they like to pick a team, and that's kind of more like the show culture than the books. But even in the show, we don't see a god. That I recall. Do we? Do we see a god? I didn't watch it all. I didn't watch the whole show, so I don't know if we see a god. But.
No. But you have the Night King, which is kind of treated as this kind of supernatural, almost godlike being.
I did see the ending season. I didn't see him as more magical than Bloodraven or Bran, though. I don't know. Maybe I was wrong.
I don't know.
Maybe because I missed a lot of it, and I was just he's just like the king of the others, right? He's just like a other king,
Yeah, that's kind of like it, but he also can turn.
He's like a dragon. He's like a monster. He's not like a god. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I could be misinterpreting that. The Red God, to me, if the Red God was taken at verbatim, at capacity, that to me would be a bajillion times more powerful than the Night's King.
Yeah, I mean, Night's King and Night King are two different things. Night King is the show. Night King is a historic White Night's Watch.
Historical guy, yeah.
That probably was a Stark, because Old Nan is mostly right about shit.
Yeah, so Martonian semantics aside, either way, I think that we never saw a R'hllor. We never, as far as I recall, at least in the books, especially, we've never seen R'hllor come down and be like, "I am R'hllor, hear me roar," Now,
obviously, people say.
I think the closest thing that we've seen to anything supernatural from a reliable narrator is the stuff that Davos sees with Melisandre when she gives birth to the thing.
And even then, I would argue that is straight ripped out of a Forbidden Planet, but put in a different context. Well, not ripped fully, but it's very much Forbidden Planet-esque.
The id.
Yeah.
Interesting. It's really interesting to hear it put in that context, because I've only ever thought of it in Star Trek context. This is cool.
No, I've always kind of came to the conclusion that because Forbidden Planet is admitted by George's own admission.
His favorite sci-fi, isn't it? Isn't it a robot?
Yeah, it's his favorite movie.
No way.
He
if you
owns the
remember
robot from the set.
Oh, that makes things fall into place so much.
Yeah, you remember that whole interview with Sybil Kekili, the actress of Shay, that was done for German television?
Yes.
And then he presents that big Robbie the Robot
that's
statue.
Robbie the Robot.
That's Forbidden Planet.
That's the robot, yeah. No, I know the movie. I've just never seen it. If I have, it's a long time ago. But I know he had an obsession.
If you're asking me if I've seen, if you're asking me if I've seen, because I'm not a hardcore Song of Ice and Fire folk like you guys are.
This was just one that was like popularly played. Like I think I saw it play on some other channels. I think Preston talked about it.
But basically, for the most part, if it's outside the main novels, excuse me, I probably haven't seen or read it.
I was kind of more
except for Skin Trade.
Fair. I was kind of trying to explain it also to like the audience in some sort of sense.
Yeah.
I'm kind of now conflicted a bit because I don't want to spoil Rick because I think he should watch Forbidden Planet.
I will watch it. I will watch it eventually. I don't mind being spoiled a little bit because, like I said, I've already been
ultimately.
I want to say there was a video where this entire connection was explained that I watched one time.
Yes, you did. Basically, the shadow is Stannis' consciousness.
Yes, no, and this is already what I also thought was pretty like when you read the book, it seems like that's what's going on. That I assumed that she was just conduiting him, or a piece of him,
Yeah,
because he dreams about doing it. He's clearly the one doing it.
Yeah.
Like that was kind of I don't know. Maybe I'm being
does it
over
hold on? Does it only? Do the shadows only appear when he's asleep?
Yep.
I mean, that's
what
happens.
That's so good.
He's asleep and he cannot be woken. He's asleep.
That is so good. Oh my god, that's good.
Yeah. And,
I'm sorry.
Yeah. So he's asleep and he cannot be woken.
Just having a nerdgasm over here.
And then he dreams. He dreams about doing it. He dreams about whatever gets done.
Yeah, that's like in like the whole Renly's peach speech.
Yeah,
mentioning that. Like he talks about it that
he dreams about what he does.
He saw, like he said, like he saw a green tent, a woman screaming, candles flickering, and Renly dying. And is like, but it doesn't matter. When I woke up, my hands were clean, but I couldn't be woken up. It was like,
yeah. He kind of, sort of, almost low key, maybe knows he did it. Oh wait, okay. So we have a very special guest in the background here, and we're gonna let him on stage here in a second. We got the Moonman.
Ooh,
oh, very nice.
How's it going, Moonman?
Hey everybody. Hey, sorry to crash like this.
Hey,
no, the sound works on the first time and everything. We're very happy to have you.
Well, I made sure this time.
This was way better.
That's what I've been doing for the last hour and a half. Is just working out the sound issues.
What port are you in today?
Oh, that's I should probably keep that a secret.
Can you tell us what state you're in? Okay.
I could be outside of America for all you know.
Alrighty then.
I was hoping you'd name it just a completely landlocked state. It's just the east coast of Kansas right now.
Live from South Dakota.
Yep, rivers.
Until proven otherwise, I will
Live
assume
from
that
the ocean of
Moonman is
Nebraska.
on the. No, I'm sorry. I will assume until proven otherwise that Moonman is on the moon.
Well, that or he's on the Rhine.
Well, either way.
Live from the Rhine, it's Moonman. So we were talking about magic and gods. That was kind of our topic for the day. We've actually mostly managed to stick to the topic that we have dittered off and kind of wandered into the Thousand Worlds quite a bit.
Oh, cool.
I don't know if you ever did the Thousand Worlds trek and went back and read any of that old shit, but we were talking about that for a while.
I've read a handful of them, not all.
Yeah, so you probably are familiar with a couple of the ones that we were yakking about. So to get the two main questions zeroed in on, we were kind of wanting to know your thoughts on, because I broke it down into 3 sections. I said you can kind of more or less, and you can break this down into your own explanation if you want to. I said you can kind of basically believe there's magic, like
But magic is more or less, it's like Teak. It's like the old Teak from his old work, and it's kind of like X-Men powers, you know. Or you can kind of believe that there's magic and it's kind of a universal inherent stuff, and it's pretty powerful, and people can use it to the point where they can become almost like godlike, but maybe they're not gods. Or you can kind of believe that there's gods, and then of gods, I would say I kind of split into two categories, and that's, do you believe that all the gods are real, or do you believe that some of the gods are real? So I would say, what do you think about all that? What do you agree with that breakdown? And then what do you believe in?
No, putting me on the spot. Well, okay. I mean, I guess I'd say, again, not having heard your conversation, unfortunately, I was working, but you know, I guess I would say it's kind of unknowable, because, like, you know, I mean, we can make guesses, and I certainly have prejudices, which maybe I can talk about, but, like, you know, he doesn't say, like most authors, you know, artists, you know, people, especially in literature, like, he doesn't like to talk a ton about the specifics of his intentions with a lot of things. But, you know, an exception to that would be talking about genre, which he has a whole, he wrote a whole essay on, which is in one of the collections that I've got. And, you know, he talks about, like, and so it's something that for whatever reason matters to him to say, like, to put down, like, in words what he thinks about that, which does have to do with the question of, like, what is the magic, like, because the way it, you know, obviously, like, one way you can break that down is to, like, does he think of this more like science fiction or more like fantasy or something, in terms of, like, how close it adheres to whatever tropes, you know, come before. But he has, you know, he actually wrote a whole essay about talking about how sort of obstinately saying, well, like, to me, there's no difference, you know? Now, you know, talking about how to him, you know, most science fiction is just as fantastical as fantasy. It's really just the setting and the things that go along with that setting. He calls it furniture in that essay. So, you know, he's being very direct about certain things, but it prompts more questions, right? It's like, so we can have, like, we can look at the evidence in the books and, like, what it feels like, but, you know, you're dealing with a guy who at least claims he doesn't, like, really want to acknowledge in his writing a difference between the two. And so I guess to me that means, like, you really have to, like, to really answer that question, either you can't because the author's saying, well, there is no difference between something like telekinesis, which is and especially when phrased that way, is a sci-fi trope, and any magic. And so you run into that problem of, like, I mean, he's saying there's no difference. So what you're trying to do then, I guess, is, like, divine, well, okay, but really how does he think of it? To the extent that, like, he has any kind of, that how the things work, like, have any kind of logic to it, you're trying to figure out that logic is to him. And I mean, I don't know, I just think it's probably pretty fraught, like, because of all that. I'm kind of rambling, but
No, you're actually going right across the exact lines that we went across. That we talked about the furniture and all these various ways he thinks about it. And we kind of talked about how it's more about trying to figure out, at least, like, you know, like, what does he think it's like, and that led me at least to thinking,
I think he falls back on the old formula. He's kind of got this way he's written about teak and stuff, and about powers and about genetics in prior works. And I think that the way he does it in Ice and Fire is that in the older works, he would kind of be upfront about it. And he'd oftentimes make the focal point of the stories about it. But in some Ice and Fire, it's not the focal point of the stories. It's just in the background. And so he doesn't need to explain it or really tell the reader. But more or less, I would argue we can infer he's relying on what he's done before. But there's tons of arguments otherwise, too. There's lots of arguments about how he's trying new things, and that he is working in different ways of, different ways of doing powers and magic and gods. And he's being vague because he's hiding that fact that he's changed aspects of how he does the writing. And so I've heard quite a few things on this.
Well, okay, so forgive me for rehashing all that. I'll just tell you my prejudices then. I think what that essay is about is, as the novel, as Ice and Fire is becoming popular in fantasy, and realizing that he is doing a genre bending thing that doesn't apply to the most standard tropes. So though even that is, I mean, so much fantasy really is indistinguishable from sci-fi in so many ways, but that's another story. It's not how I think at that time in the 90s and the 2000s. I mean, that essay's from the mid 2000s or something.
Yeah,
maybe it's earlier. No, I think it is.
It's from Dream Songs, I think.
Yeah,
it's from a while ago.
And so I think my prejudice is he's writing that as a way of putting on the feeling like he needs to put on the table, look, whatever revelations come along that seem like I'm hinting there is a logic to this magic that you, the fantasy reader, might interpret as having the feeling of sci-fi tropes. No, you're wrong. Shut up. This is fantasy in the only ways that matter, because it's about swords and dragons, the characters thinking this stuff is magic, and so I'm going to keep saying it's fantasy, and because it is, and but if I actually in my mind and subtly hint that it's all this stuff has a genetic logic and works on the fantastical tropes of 70s sci-fi like telekinesis and mind expansion and telepathy, and along those, and time travel along those lines, that shut up. It's still a fantasy. You're this is all that matters is that it, so don't bother me with that shit. That's what
I would agree. I think we have a similar, I think you and me and Andy kind of have a similar interpretation. Rust is a little bit more of a interpretation. I think it's a bit more expansive than ours is in terms of the power of gods. He's pretty open. We were talking about earlier to the idea of maybe competing powers of godliness, or the idea of that there were gods a long time ago that are now gone from the universe, and there's maybe lesser. You could explain what you kind of meant, but almost more like divine trickster beings.
Yeah, I was just saying, if there was a creator god, he's not hanging around anymore. So I'm not particularly open to the possibility of a creator god. I'm just saying, if there was one, he's not here at the moment, or at least he's not interacting. And I think any current gods that are able to physically manifest themselves and do miracles are basically taking advantage of magic that already exists. I don't think they are the source of the magic. I think they just have some knowledge of how to use the magic that other people don't, and they're using it to their advantage as well.
Yeah, I guess I didn't talk about gods. So I guess so much of Ice and Fire to me is it's all these reversals of your perception of things. I feel like there's, I mentioned this last week, we were talking about a totally different subject, but this idea of nested traps of perception, and so at first, you know, you might think, okay, well, like there's all these gods, and well, it's a fantasy novel, so some of these gods may be like literal, like really literal beings that are there, that exist, that have very literal powers. And then you read along, you think, well, like, okay, I see there's this whole sort of probably more complex layer to this, probably because I'm getting hints at the sort of sci-fi vibe of some of these tropes, and at the way religion is being used in a more sort of more as a for expression of ideology, and then really it being about the literal gods. But then, you know, as I go on, keep thinking, what I realize is like, oh, it's all a trick, it's all a trap, it's all a goddamn lie. And so, like, he could easily then also be like, well, yeah, no, there is like there, some of these gods are like very literal gods. Now, my actual prejudices are that you know, again, just like with magic, you have to ask the question, like, what do you mean by a god? And, you know, I would, if I had a, you know, my prejudice would be there. I don't think there's any gods the way necessarily that many like of our real world religions conceive of God, or that some of those religions in the book conceive of their gods, but that nonetheless there is something that you could maybe attribute, and maybe in different cases to different degrees, like, you know, the existence of all this magic. Many of the characters, you know, attribute it to their gods or gods of some kind. Now, I would say, like, if that's all it is, if there's just people are able to use this magic, I mean, is that a god? Well, no. You know, that sounds like they're that sounds. I would say that's more like they're confused about the nature of the world. But on the other hand, so like in two different cases that are to me the most like we know, or there's the most to say about, are the old gods, which it's not super clear what practitioners of old god religion, tree worshippers, really actually what their conception of the old gods are. It's not really clear what the conception of the old gods has been over thousands of years. So like it's really hard to say like how correct are they about what they mean by the old gods, or do different people mean different things? Like, do they just mean like in a kind of is it just too many of them just fetishistic in that the trees have been imbued by carving these faces on them with this you know,
yeah, I
divine
tend to think
fetishes,
there's
you know?
some of that going on. I tend to think there's some of that going on. I think there's
some,
some
certainly that's a piece of it.
conceptualization. Yeah, there's some conceptualization of what it is. We kind of hear people explain that like the old, you know, that the children of the forest and that reinseers would like go into the tree. They kind of get it, but I think at the same time they also kind of don't get it, and to the same degree that I feel like the old Starks that buried their people in stone so Weirwood roots couldn't touch them or whatever. Like, I think there's two different levels of interaction with this and two different ways of thinking about it, depending on how prevalent it is in your day-to-day life. Are you warring against the children of the forest, and are you actually having to worry about people accessing your ancestors' bodies or breaking into your dreams or ravens spying on you, or those things not currently occurring, and so the old gods are more of an abstract concept? It's kind of like,
right,
you know?
right. And to me, there's a big divide there between like the fetish object of the trees. Maybe that's what they're referring to when they say old gods, or do they just mean ancestor worship? Are they, when they say the old gods, do they do they consciously know what I'm talking about? Is we worship all of our ancestors and the ancestors throughout time because they have this effect on our lives, and this is where we commune with them, is the tree. Because, like you're saying, there is this in these trees. We are, there's a lot of reason to guess and understand, are the souls or consciousnesses of, I don't know, maybe billions of creatures from over thousands of years, singers and humans. And in that sense, it is God's plural. To whatever degree were they conscious of that at some time? Are they now? Or even if they're not or weren't, if those collective consciousnesses perhaps are exerting or ever have exerted some force of any kind on the world, whether it's just sort of telepathic and sort of consciousness, part of reproducing their cultural consciousness or whatever, like, or more directly, like, is that, maybe that does make them real gods essentially because of that kind of power, or the fact that they're worshipped? So you're kind of asking, like, what do you mean by God, and then trying to identify, like, well, yeah, I mean, if those things are real, and they are kind of supernatural and magical in this sense that, they're fantastical and powerful, and they are aware of them and worship them, then I guess in that sense their gods would be real, in a pretty literal sense,
Yeah, I think
Well,
that
I don't
in the sense we were talking about Bloodraven in that sense too, as a being that has power beyond people and could be viewed in the context of somebody who could look at him as being a god. I had an interesting question that came out of just talking about the Weirwood old gods. So there's the Grishka from the Song of Leah, Song
for Leah.
Yes, and it makes me think about that, right? So, it's never totally explained, but Bran encounters children that do not have bodies, and they are like flying around in ravens. So, it's almost implied there's some degree of autonomy when you're dead. And then it's also implied that you kind of lose yourself over time if you stay stuck in an animal. Which makes me feel that being dead, I feel like that there is just, at a certain point, wouldn't you just lose yourself over time no matter what? And then if you're part of the collective, it makes me wonder, what are you losing yourself to? So is there almost like a layer to this thing where the outer layer has more autonomy? And as you lose that autonomy, as you die, after you die and your spirit is out of your own body and it's traveling through an animal or traveling through various animals or living in a tree, do you suck down inwards towards the more core where you would be considered part of the perma collective consciousness, and as somebody alive you could maybe access multiple levels of this, but after you die you just drift down until eventually you are part of the perma consciousness? And did the Grishka sound like that to you guys when you read the fucking Song of Leah? Would be my next question.
Oh, totally.
I would come into here that the Grishka itself is like it's in the story. Our protagonists, who are, I think they're called psionics. I think that's the term that Gurm uses there for people with telepathic powers, or psis. PSI.
Yeah, there's some kind of word he uses for it.
It's some sort of word. Regardless, they're Robin Liana. Robin Liana.
Yeah. That's John. Robin
no,
Liana, though.
It's Robin Liana. By the way, written exactly the same way as Robb Stark and Lyanna Stark, for those who didn't know. They kind of, both of them are telepaths.
Called Leah at least once in the
it's definitely definitely some references going on there where he's drifting back to his own stories. He goes back to the same wells a lot. He oftentimes returns to the Well of Martin to write for his stuff.
Yeah, what I was going, where I'm going is they do at some point try to see what the Grishka is. And they get, they describe it as there is no higher sentience. It's like not even the yes, I live that they find in some of the least, aware things. That's how they describe it. Not a yes, I live. So, as how I understood the Grishka is not anything but a vessel to facilitate this hive mind.
Okay.
It's a sort of parasite that facilitates a hive mind.
Like the trees.
Because
The
it's
trees
like,
aren't alive.
yes,
They just
but
go
what
out
happens in
alive.
the story is very important. Why does the Grishka create a hive mind? Or it's speculated it might be a lure. It's because it feeds on the bodies of the people that go into this hive mind. This is what the religion of the planet where
Yeah,
they go and
it is.
investigate
They
Grishka
bring
is
the
on.
people to the Grishka, yeah.
The people basically begin joining the hive mind by getting a bit of Grishka put on them. And when they are ready, they go into one of the caves where the Grishka is like full of, the Grishka being like a big jelly like glue that eats people. They go into that, lie down, and then they basically are consumed by it.
Yeah.
Now, whether that has implications for A Song of Ice and Fire, I don't know, because the Weirwoods don't
The
like
Weirwoods get
eat.
fed people. They do get fed people.
They do get fed people, but again, when it comes to this, I would compare the Grishka, I think, the most to the Weirwoods themselves. The Weirwoods are not necessarily, you know, a thing that is sentient in
Yeah,
beyond being a
yeah.
tree.
There's a tree
What
that
it
you can make a
is,
hive mind
it
in.
has the ability to facilitate a hive mind,
Yeah.
which is kind of described as, as they go on in A Song for Leah. It's basically the afterlife that everyone looked for. It's the concept of heaven. That's how at least the deuteragonist Liana describes it.
So when the Grisha goes away, the hive mind goes away, right?
Yes, presumably
Yeah.
without Weirwoods, there isn't a hive mind in the Song of Ice and Fire.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that sounds right to me.
Heaven is destroyed.
I actually, once again, similar to last week, a book we were talking about was holding up my laptop. And I'm trying to find a particular passage. I haven't talked about this anywhere else, but I have kind of an interesting tidbit about Song for Leah and the Grishka and the collective consciousness there. I'm trying to find the passage though, so give me a minute. But yeah, continue amongst yourselves.
So to answer what Theory of Ice and Fire said, I don't know if Martin views any of this stuff as necessarily like stealing a second life from the living. I don't know. I think it's a lot of. I think it's a lot more hippy dippy. I think the collectives and collective consciousness in general is viewed as a very positive thing. And so, like I think the burning of the Weirwoods is tragic and stuff like that is kind of how he's portraying it. But maybe I'm wrong.
A lot of George's stories. While we wait for Moonman to find his passage, a lot of what he writes about also is the conflict between humanity, with humans being very much alone in this sort of sense. They're not part of a hive mind. They are alone in that sort of sense. And the conflicts between humans and hive minds. You see that in Men of Greywater Station, where basically the entire conflict is there is a fungus hive mind on this planet called Greywater that is fighting against the military research base that is located on. Or you have, for example, you mentioned Tough Voyaging. What's the story's name from Tough Voyaging?
No, I can't remember. But yeah, but the planet,
it's some I don't remember. Exactly.
Yeah, the planet with the green seeing crustacean creature things.
They're like some sort. I visualize them as like big fucking clams.
Yeah, I say like there was some kind of big clam thing.
They're like a big clam hive minds that live. I think they're called mud pots. Mud pots.
Yeah, the mud
yes.
pots. Yeah.
The mud pots, and they are basically being hunted as a delicacy by the colonists, by the human colonists on the planet. So what the hive, and because the hive mind feels the pain, although they send
They
out,
also feel the loss, you know.
they feel the loss and the pain.
Yeah.
They are like, they retaliate by controlling and mutating the wildlife, like the marine wildlife.
Yeah, they basically grow wildlife into monsters, and they send the monsters to attack.
Yeah, exactly. Or again, for the whole background of the whole Thousand Worlds universe, the whole background has a lot of, humanity is at war. A lot of this lore behind the universe is the human empire before, it
Is at
collapsed.
war with hive mind collective races, yeah.
Yeah, on one hand you have the Harangans
And the Findi or whatever.
and the Findi, who are also a sort of collective.
Yeah.
Both of these are hive mind like.
Yeah, the
creatures.
Ferengian are hive mind slavers, as I recall, and the Findi are like hive mind, like they're all linked together.
The in that sense, it's more like the Findi act more like locusts, but with a very weak hive mind.
And the Harangan
Whereas
they control certain people, they have races that they have actually like taken over mentally.
Yes,
and some of them they're kind of like, they're not, I would say, like they're more telepathic than they are sentient. I thought it was described as, where it's like they're not necessarily as sentient as the people are, but they're very telepathically adept. Like the what were they? Remember one of the ones that it's described by the Steel Angels as that they could send their mind over miles and like attack men's minds longer than a laser gun could shoot you.
Yes, that's I think the line from and 7 times never kill man. Which,
yeah, so there's some pretty interesting.
By the way, a fun tidbit there. One of the artworks created for its publication in I think Asimov's for that magazine.
Yeah.
Directly inspired the artwork for Wookiees.
Yeah, I think I do remember hearing this actually, and I know the cover you're talking about because that's the cover of And 7 Times Kill Man that I'm familiar with.
Yeah, Wookiees are kind of like the appearance of Wookiees, at least, is indirectly George is indirectly responsible for it.
Or the artist, right? Like of that.
I mean, indirectly in the sense that the artist went off of George's descriptions, and the artist then and then one of the art directors for Star Wars kind of went for that as well.
That's fascinating. Yeah. Because I do know the one you're talking about. It's like I feel like it's very, very similar too. Like even down to the belt, right? Like I don't know if he's carrying a bowcaster, but the belt is very similar.
They're carrying guns, I think, in that artwork.
Yeah, and sometimes Never Come Out is a very interesting story. So we were talking just about Thousand Worlds stuff. Are there any other Thousand Worlds topics we want to hit on?
We were talking about in the context
before we go back to the so are there any other Thousand Worlds topics we want to hit on before we go back to the Grishka? Or is there? I'm trying to think of other hive mind examples.
One of them I think is in and 7 times Never Kill Man, because it's the pyramids.
Oh, okay, yeah, that is kind of like a.
And 7 times Never Kill Man.
It's a very similar defense to the mud pots. It makes the Steel Angels go crazy. Or arguably, it makes them go crazy. I think it's doing that. I don't know if it's explicitly spelled out, but it seemed to me that was what was occurring. They start killing their children after they start getting too wild on the planet. It's like a defense mechanism.
Yeah. Have we found the passage, Moonman?
No, I'm probably not going to. It's a long story. I don't have the PDF to search.
It's okay. It's okay.
I remember, so I'll describe it.
Yeah, go for it.
So like, at some point when they're talking to the administrator and the researcher who's been on the planet, and maybe it's after they go to the sort of communal service of the Shkeen, and they witness them talking and them being joyful or something, and they're talking to them about what the Shkeen are all about, and what and their relationship to the Grishka. And the administrator is describing it basically as like, well, it's their religion. The Grishka is just an animal or fungus or something, and it feeds on them, but it's also their god. It's their religion, and they worship it. They want to be part of it. They want to join with it, and they talk about what these people are talking about, how much they want to go join, and it gets to a point of language because they're asking him like, well, what is this they're talking about? What's this word? And he's like, well, that's, when they go join with it, and it eats them, but they believe they live on in it, and it's so this it's their afterlife. And because he's sort of comparing all this to a religion. Firstly, because like he doesn't actually think they live on after it. He thinks it's they're being manipulated by the Grishka to come and be eaten, and there is no afterlife. So he's talking about this as if it's a religion, and specifically in the sense that it's not real. Now, the other woman at the time says, well, on that point of language, when he says, well, it means it's the afterlife, he says, well, it's not quite it. And he kind of brushes her off in some way. It's been a while since I read it. And the sense you get from it is like, and he's like, well, it's basically that. See, it's their religion. They do this. That's why, so afterlife is the best thing to compare it to. And she's like, maybe she's even a linguist. I don't remember. But like, she's like, it's not quite right. But she doesn't say what she thinks would be a better definition, or what would be a better translation, rather. And that's interesting. I mean, it's the sense you get reading it is like it's sort of a minor point about how like these people are different, these concepts don't map, this culture is very alien, and so like his use of the English word, afterlife is not quite right. But you get the sense, and then you're thinking like, well, okay, but maybe it does have to do with the fact that he's trying to map this onto like not just Earth religions, but his concept of them. And then, but later, by the time the story ends, you're basically convinced that actually there is an afterlife for those who join with the Grishka, in that their consciousnesses, it seems, I think, I've said you can interpret it some other way, but I think the point is, your consciousness does live on in the Grishka. It is a thing of eternal communion and bliss with these millions of other consciousnesses in a kind of collective existence. So it's not just a lure. It's not just fake. They are literally living on. So in a way then, like, that really, it is contrary to the administrator's point of view, that this is all phony. Yeah. And then when you think about that, like, it also means, like, however you want to compare it to human religions or ideas of heaven, obviously that's the point he's making by calling their idea that they live on their afterlife concept. Mm-hmm. Like, it is kind of different in that even in, in like Christianity or Islam, where there is a concept of a heaven, an eternal life, in some kind of communion with God, but this is in those religions specifically, it's mediated like by faith, essentially, right? Like, it's not something you can it is an afterlife, in that it is not directly connected to this one. You can't presumably for most believers probably feel you can't commune with those dead consciousnesses, nor can you see a glimpse of heaven before you die. You only have the revelations of prophets, but you personally can't. So that's a bit different than there's this physical animal that you can live on in a collective consciousness that with the right techniques, either your own telepathic ability or by putting some of that animal on your head, you can actually interact with in the real world. And in fact, you can, it can be studied and observed. It doesn't actually require that faith. That's not really how their religion works, which is different.
Yeah.
And so when you think about that, what that means is, like, in a very real way, it's not their afterlife in the way that he means it. If they are living and then they go on, almost all of their species, like, it's great tragedy when someone they die in some accident and aren't able to be, like, taken to the Grushka, right?
Yeah.
Like they think of this
Because
as
they can't,
they
can't join the collective. No one sees them ever again.
And then that's it, right? That's it. So, and they say it's open to everybody, humans. Everybody should come and do this. But certainly, all of us on this planet, we're all doing this. And what that means is that what I think she is trying to say, what the hint is, if you're, when you go back and read it a second time and thinking like, wait, well, what is this? Is that what she's picking up linguistically is that they're not saying afterlife. They're saying, I look forward to the afterlife. I look forward to heaven when I die. They're not talking about dying because they don't die. They're talking about life. Not afterlife, life. Because their whole species goes on to live this very physical existence in this creature. That means the actual life, the main part of the life cycle of this species is an extremely long communal existence in a fungus. That is what the Shkeen are. Their humanoid form is like an earlier part of their life cycle. It's not the difference between life and afterlife after death. It's an earlier part of the life cycle, like tadpoles or like
butterflies or
caterpillars and a moth, right? They
transform larva and flies,
right. Exactly. They transform into a later part of their life. And I think that's what she's saying. That's the little, like, she's saying, no, it's what she's getting at. She sees the word and knows how it fits into the language. She's like, no, that they're just talking about life.
Yeah.
And that makes me think of the Weirwoods and the children. Because if the singers, as they call themselves, are a similar life form and similar society, in which for millions of years of their existence on that planet, most of them have gone into the trees and lived on for an extremely long time, then their actual that is their actual life. That is the main part of their life cycle. The humanoid little elves are simply the earlier part of a life cycle and are therefore actually just the part of the life cycle in which reproduction happens, because they have children before they go into the trees or into the Grishka, and a part of the life cycle that tends to the Grishka and the trees, defends them, communes with them in a way that looks like religion maybe, but actually that's their real life. They're not waiting to die and go to heaven, even though that's a good metaphor. They're waiting to live out the rest of their actual normal life cycle, making the singers, the humanoid singers, simply the youngest.
That's why they're the
generation.
children of the forest. Yeah,
they're the children of the forest.
Yeah.
The actual society, the real society living its real life, is the collective consciousness that's housed in the forest, in the trees, in the children of the forest.
Yeah, that is the best explanation of the Grishka and the children, I think, that you could possibly
I never connected those dots, but
yeah, no, I think that's the best, actually, because that is the perfect way of describing the Grishka. And I having only read the story once, I was not as familiar with going back and quoting it like that. But yes, I do remember exactly what you're talking about with the language thing, where they're trying to figure out what they mean, like what exactly is this thing, and then there's a barrier in her trying to describe it, and then no one ever quite hurdles that barrier, but she's trying to convince them it's all these different things.
At the time, she's trying to describe that, but she doesn't really know that it is real, right? And so she's kind of still thinking, and she's
on the more human term,
she's kind of like, it is their afterlife, but like that's not what they're saying really. They're saying something else that doesn't quite make sense to me, and he's kind of trying to fit into this human view. But that's, to me, is like, that's why they're the children of the forest. They're the youngest generation of a much larger, longer lived society.
Society, exactly. No, that is a perfect way of putting it. And understanding it too. I think that is a better way of understanding it than trying to think of them as dying and then going on. And it's it's like, because they're not dead, they're alive. They're just alive in this different context.
Yeah.
What is the Grisha, or where should I look it up?
So Song for Leah.
Learn about it.
Yeah, Song for Leah, one of his earlier ones that won an award, I want to say.
Okay, Song for Leah.
So.
Yeah, that's all the info I needed.
It's just what they're investigating.
It's
it's short. It's very quick to read. The audiobook is great. That's how I read it. The one time that I did read it was on the audiobook.
Yeah, I do remember that interaction. It's this is from Valkyrengi. That's the planetary administrator of the human colony, and he is the one who's trying to explain it away, oh no, this is just what their religion, whatever. Very much he's supposed to be kind of weirdly arrogant and kind of very set in his ways about everything, to the point where even at the end, when everything that happens in that story happens, he's still very much the skeptical character that is very much wrong about this.
Yeah, really quick to echo what Michael said. Moonman, you should definitely make a video, even if
you
it's
should.
Just a shorter one, just that does that, because that's a great way to not only tie in the older works, and I think that's one of the missing elements in talking about the book series is talking about Martin's old stuff, but also it just is a much better explanation of the Grishka and the children than I think is out there right now.
I feel enlightened. I never connected that dot. You're completely right, and I'm mad at myself that I didn't see it.
Well, I think the children almost say something to that effect.
Yeah.
The children almost say something to that effect too. I thought the children almost said something to that effect about being.
It's not as explicit, if I remember.
I don't remember, but
no. Well,
a lot of things adds up.
About being young.
Everything we've been thinking about,
I feel like they described themselves as being young, or part of their life as being young or whatever, as though they were conveying that they're old, but they're not actually long lived by comparison to what they will be. They will live much longer.
Right, which is how it makes sense. Those same conversations that Leaf has with Bran, where she's like, I'm several hundred years old, and he's like, whoa, wow, you're so old, and she's like, no, I'm not. I'm just a larva. I'm a larva, and one day I'm going to be a fly. And you can imagine, those same conversations thousands of years earlier would have been how they, explaining to humans like what the deal is how they get the name Children of the Forest. When they say like, no, this isn't us. We're just children. We're just the youth. I'm a teenager. I'm protecting my real. My job is to reproduce and protect my real society before I mature and get to join the actual society.
Yeah.
Which is the trees, and
then
they introduce humans to the trees.
To answer Blood, your question, will I ever do a video on the Meat House Man? I would need to go back and read the series again. First off, those are also ones that I've only read one time. There's several ones from his extended work that I've only read one time, and my mind is nothing if not a sieve. And so I would need to go back and read them again. But I would recommend you to Kevin Pendragon's most recent video on Littlefinger. He does some great Meat House Man stuff in that video, and he also does The Stand by Stephen King, which actually got me to watch the series about The Stand, because I was curious about it. I didn't have the time to read the book, but I was like, I could flip on some episodes and maybe watch The Stand. But he does a great job of talking about Meat House Man in most of the ways that I would talk about it. I think there's some other things that I would like to talk about it, and I do have a very interesting Martin theory. That it's not a Song of Ice and Fire theory; it's a George R.R. Martin theory, and that's that. I think that when George R.R. Martin writes some of his stories, particularly the ones that involve certain aspects of, not all, but certain aspects that involve prostitution or things like that, or certain aspects of sex, I think that he's drawing heavily from real world encounters that he's had, either with intimate partners or with intimate partners that are not, he's not dating. I think that Martin may have I was gonna. That sounds kind of slanderous, but I'm like, I don't know how to explain it. He has this way of writing about certain things and sexual topics that ring of intimate familiarity on a level that I'm like, I wonder. And so I kind of would like to make a video that I don't know how far I'd pitch into that topic, but that talks about just some of those things. And Meat House Man is certainly one of those works. Like, I feel that, like, even if you're not willing to buy into my theory that Martin may or may not have hired prostitutes in his life and he might be writing about those experiences, I think you might buy into my theory, and the theory that's generally out there, like Preston thinks this, many creators think this that have read those books, that Martin is oftentimes injecting his own sexuality and sexual experiences as a young man. Sometimes, like Pendragon makes this assessment very well, that sometimes he's maybe injecting some unhealthy misogyny.
His own body.
Yeah, sometimes he's injecting some unhealthy thoughts about real world relationships he's had. Sometimes, and that's why his writing changes over time. Like, he makes the point that Meat House Man often rings of some incel shit that maybe Martin has dropped a little bit of over the years, and maybe Martin has maybe retained some things, or maybe Martin wrote a certain way because of certain breakups, just something Preston talks about a lot. And I think that there's probably a few things you could say about all of that, but many people have said all the best things, in my opinion. But if I ever do a Meat House Man thing, I'll have to reread it. That's for sure. I one day may go back and do more Littlefinger content, and a Meat House Man reread would be. I had so many different angles that I was trying to look at it, that there was many that I did not try to come look at it from. And I think that there are certainly stories like Meat House Man in the George R. Martin old timey sphere, and probably other works that are floating around that you could draw on. Like, one that I heard pitched to me was, what the hell was it? It was like an old timey English novel. I can't remember for the life of me. But it's well talked about, and the main character follows a very similar, in some regards, path to Littlefinger.
Wuthering
Heights. Yep, Wuthering Heights. Yep, and so I would like to read Wuthering Heights and to draw those connections. My idea for the series was to call it the Withering Finger or the Fingering Heights. So either one sounded funny to me. but the point is that it seemed to me that Martin's a well-read guy, probably much better well-read than me, particularly on fiction. I don't read a lot of fiction, to be quite honest. I've read very little fiction, to be quite honest. And so my guess is that he is a very well-read person on many fiction works that I'm completely unfamiliar with. And so Wuthering Heights would not surprise me if he is drawing from many sources that I just haven't read. And so, I was like, within his own works too, he's drawing from a bunch of sources. So there's plenty of stuff that could be said about that. So maybe when I do the Wuthering Heights read, maybe I'll do the Meathouse Man read at the same time. That's the long answer to that question, is that there's some good work out there on right now. I probably have some things to say, but I would need to go and check it out to really refine my thoughts on all that. I don't know. Does anyone else have any things? Yeah, does anyone else have any things they want to say? We're kind of cresting into the 2.5 hour mark, and I was thinking maybe we'd wrap it up, so we could maybe do like some final thoughts. And then I'm very hungry. I at some point need to go eat some food. We were talking about getting sushi earlier. And that
is there anybody who believes that there is no magic and no gods whatsoever in this universe?
As in, this is outright hidden sci-fi in the hardest terms.
I would fall back on the Martinism and say you can't. I would say you can't truly believe that, because you could call the X-Men magic, right? What the X-Men are magic, right? Aren't they magic? You know,
Yeah,
but in the same way. But I kind of fall into that camp though. I tend to lean kind of hard X-Men on it. I mean, I don't think he broke from the tradition. I think you can see all that tradition, and I think that Preston lays this out pretty well in his series of videos, where it's like. And if you go read the books, it's right there. It's like, there's this tradition of how he's written, and it's been structured, and it goes into wild cards. I didn't read wild cards, but talking to Justin Bear Book Club and watching some other videos when people who've read wild cards, I'm like, okay, now this seems to be a very consistent way of him portraying magical powers or superhero powers, whatever you want to call it. And so I do kind of tend to go that way, where I'm like, no, I think it's X-Men, but we can call that magic, because what's the difference between Magneto and being an electricity magnetic wizard, right? What's the difference between Magneto and playing Arcanum and taking the electricity tree, right? There's not much difference.
Yeah, there's another side to that as well, which is that so much of fantasy, like, works on that level anyway, right? Like so many fantasy stories on some level have lots of sci-fi tropes, are about post-apocalyptic societies, is mixing all this up. I think it's like maybe it's something to do with like the boom of the last many years with the Lord of the Rings movies and the almost simultaneous publication of Harry Potter, that like really like cements really forward in the popular culture, like certain ideas of what it means to have a story about magic and faux medieval fantasy gods and monsters and things. Like the actual history of these genres is not that different. A favorite point that really bears on, or example that really bears on Martin's talking about Martin, is Jack Vance, which the Dying Earth stories are some of the most like influential on like fan came after. They are one of the principal inspiration for Dungeons and Dragons. In so many of the creatures and spells and objects are just taken right from them, and just the whole sort of concept of the world. And those books, they're stories that some of them, many stories that got stitched up into novels. Some of them, they're great. There's a collection out there called Stories of the Dying Earth. There's something that has all of them. If you get it, and you should, start with the Kugel stories, which I think the first book in that collection is Eyes of the Overworld. That's the reference that are the eyes on the Vance banner.
I was gonna say this is the House Vance. This is the House Vance references. Yeah,
he's a big fan of Vance, and no surprise why. I mean, it's some of the best shit ever written. The Kugel stories. I don't even want to say why or how, because like it's so good. These are stories that were for pulp magazines that got stitched up. They're very like they're very light in a way, and they're not like they're not that much like Ice and Fire on the surface. I mean, but what the concept is the dying Earth. It's some like million years in the future Earth where the sun has turned red, and so there's only like red sunlight, and everyone knows in one way or another, or most cultures around the world seem to know, at any moment the sun could just wink out, and then like slowly everyone will die in a frozen darkness. And but what's fun about the stories is this character, the basically the wily rogue of a D&D campaign is Kugel, this con artist asshole sociopath who has, you know, a little bit of swordplay and a little bit of magic, like a good starting D&D role. I say as if I know anything about that. But he goes throughout this world that is not just post-apocalyptic, but like post-apocalypse, many apocalypses, such that there is no hint of it is Earth, yet there is no hint of anything recognizable from any human culture. All the dead civilizations from a million years past that get mentioned are things that are like, you know, hundreds of thousands of years in our future. But he runs into magicians who have magic and cast spells, but then there's all kinds of weird monster creatures, and then as it goes on, and then there's things like dragons and demon-looking things, and then you find there's other dimensions that maybe that he can get into occasionally, that, oh, maybe that's where some of these things come from, and then you realize some wizard casually mentions some little creature is from this other galaxy, and you're like, oh, this stuff is coming from outer space. And then in the later ones, the wizard's castles like take off and go into space, but then there's even a passage somewhere where like after all these stories where you've read about, like, you know, he learned like wizards and occasionally Kugel say some spells. At some point, he's able to talk to like some kind of weird demon creature in an alternate dimension who's listening for spells basically, and like in his ability to manipulate our, you know, Kugel's dimension, our dimension, is how spells seem to be enacted in some way. And so, and it's on some base, like it's his job, like he's like this demon creature is like punching a clock with the lash of some greater demon to like do like little things when some wizard says some words, and you're like, oh, so like this isn't, you know, just mysterious magic. It's basically down to like political economy at that point, like interdimensional political economy, and that's like, you know, that's like I say, that's some of the most influential like
that's phenomenal.
I
did not know that was so influential on Dungeons and Dragons. I play a lot of Dungeons and Dragons in the 5e right now, but I played it in the 3 and that sort of stuff when I was a little younger. Also, thank you, John Cribben,
classic monsters.
Really quick, thank you, John Cribben, for the two euros. I assume that's the euro symbol. My eyes are fucking trash, but thank you for the super chat. Favorite Targaryen king or cohort? Is that asking me my favorite Targaryen king or cohort? I assume.
I think so.
So favorite Targaryen king, I'm definitely going to say Daemon Blackfire. That's he is the best. He's the best king. You know, I consider him the true king.
Hell yeah.
But yeah, and if I had to pick a Targaryen king that actually had the name Targaryen, that's a toss up between Maegor the Cruel, just because, yeah, you know, you got to be spicy with that one, and I do also kind of like the Conciliator King, not maybe like as a guy, but I just think his story is fun. And I think he was the one that Martin said was his favorite. Maybe Martin said a different one was his favorite, but the Conciliator King had a lot of interesting stuff going on with him. I'm not actually that boned up on all of the back lore of the various Targaryen kings and families. I read Fire and Blood like on the audiobook, listened to it like one time. So I mean, like, I remember certain beats and certain aspects, but there's a lot of stuff that I'm not mega boned up on when it comes to the whole lineage of all the various kings and such. I do like Egg. Egg's a good king. He's fun, but I kind of am most familiar with him in the Duncan Egg, where he's not a fucking king; he's just a little kid. So, you know, I often leave him out of the king, even though he, in the grand scheme of things, is one of the kings. But to bring us back to what we were talking about before with Vance and everything, that's fascinating. That was so influential in Dungeons and Dragons. As I played D&D, and it gets kind of sci-fi. You eventually get into like a lot of stuff where there's some sci-fi elements. Like, I haven't gotten around to play it yet. I've just been fucking busy doing shit. But I have the Dungeons and Dragons game that came out relatively recently, or it's based in the Dungeons and Dragons universe, the Baldur's Gate, the new one. And there's like Nautilus spaceships flying around, and there's men riding dragons through portals, chasing the squid monster people that had an intergalactic empire that used to rule everyone and control them through mind slavery. And doesn't this sound like we're back to the Harangans again and dealing with fucking Daenerys' dragons? Like, and so yeah, so this again is this combination of that they bleed together. There really isn't Martin's point to there is no real sci-fi or fantasy. It's just we're telling stories, and then this is like, you know, us having fun with the stories. I think there's that there's that is basically where our conversation is coming back to because of the Vance stuff, which I think is fucking was again super fucking interesting. Yeah, having not read it, I'm very curious to see it. You know,
like I say, get the collection. Everybody should get the collection. Don't read the first set of stories. Partway into the book with Eyes of the Overworld, read to the end, and if you're still enjoying it, go back to the beginning. But like most of the a ton of the original monsters and spells are literally just from those books.
That's
and
so
the whole
interesting.
idea, like the Kugel stories are like he's just this jerk going around, and every story he's in some new place or some two new places that is just completely wild and imaginative, and like anything goes in this world because it's a million years in the future, and like you don't know how any of this happened, and he doesn't care. And so like literally any fantasy or sci-fi like thing can just kind of show up and just be shrugged like, yeah, this is just the world.
That's fine. Just
there's
not
not
like course now.
Yeah, no, I mean, yeah, absolutely. But they're really great. Like they're some of the best writing like ever in any sense. But yeah, I would check it out.
I love that kind of stuff. I never wrote it out super hardcore, but I wrote one or two small short stories from it for classes. I had a sci-fi fantasy world where the main character, and this is before I ever read A Song of Ice and Fire, the main character had this sword that couldn't be broken, but it's because it'd been forged a long ass fucking time ago, back when there was technology. And he had been infected with a virus that basically was sentient, and the sentient virus would try to control your mind. And it was back from when the apocalyptic wars had happened. And he would be talked to by a telepathic chimera that was a white tiger with deer antlers that flew around with wings and a scorpion tail. And there was different chimeras that were flying around trying to control like politics of the world and stuff. And so I love stuff that blends all that together, because it's just it's just something that I've always loved stories like that. And so no, I think that's just inherently kind of a part of wanting to make these types of worlds, you know. And that was a post-apocalyptic world, you know. So it's like, but once again, like you talk about the Vance thing, it's like you could have a world with dozens of apocalypses. Like people have argued that about Planetos, right? That potentially we're on Apocalypse 10 of Planetos, and that's why it looks the way it does. Reddit's really quick. The D&D Githyanki being taken with 1,000 worlds. I wondered about that shit. I was super curious. I was like, what? The Githyanki, and that's also who we were trying to figure out earlier in that was being referred to in And Seven Times Never Kill Man. When we're talking about mind powers that can get you from further away than a laser gun, it's the Githyanki, I think is who they were yakking about.
Yeah, the Githyanki are a name that the creators of D&D basically borrowed from the Thousand Worlds.
Yeah, that's interesting. I had wondered that too. I was like, did they take that from the Thousand Worlds, or was that just were they both borrowing it from somewhere older? I just hadn't bothered to look it up, and I was curious.
Does it come from Vance? I wonder.
Yeah, it might come from Vance.
As far as I know, it's not Vance. That specific thing.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense that they would take from him too. You know, that they would have been that these guys would have read some of his stories
Yeah.
for sure.
And I don't know if Githyanki are something old. They might be something that appeared just in the 5e, in which case, yeah, there's definitely all kinds of more modern references within the newer iterations of Dungeons and Dragons than there were in the original versions, you know. And I say the oldest one I played is 3. I never played 2 or 1, so there's plenty of Dungeons and Dragons. I was just too
I
young
think
to
Githyanki
experience.
are from the 2nd edition.
Yeah, Reddit says that
That makes
Reddit, from research it's done, it's original to George R. Martin. That's very interesting. I'd be super curious to know. I wonder if Martin had a hand in that. Talk to people. Like I wonder if it was. I wonder if there was any kind of.
I mean, if they were fans of Jack Vance, those guys,
Yeah.
then it would make perfect sense that they were early on to picking up Martin. Like,
Yeah,
he's,
that's interesting.
Published in the
'Cause he's
same,
very-
and
he's
passed
very
around in the
advanced.
same places, you know.
Okay, that's fascinating. I think I'm going to wrap up the stream here. So with these very fun revelations, not only about the children of the forest that Moonman has shared with us, but also with these kind of interesting connections back to Vance and the Thousand Worlds. Hopefully this has been a good stream for everybody, and we've had some fun stuff to think about. And then I'm gonna put this one up. If it's not already going up, I'm gonna make sure it's up on YouTube, and then so people can watch it if they haven't watched it. And thank you again for the super chat. Of the €2, that definitely said all my super chats go to paying for expensive cat food. So I'm very happy when that happens.
Nice.
Makes life better. But yeah, so and then thank you guys so much for coming. Man, thanks for showing up. Even though you showed up a little bit late, thanks for bothering to come by and come on the stream. You know, it's always super
Always
exciting to
good
talk
talking
to you
to you
because
guys.
you bring lots of great insight. Like I think it was mentioned before by one of the other people last time that it's kind of like having someone else who showed up a bit later to, like, you know, we've had like various generations of people come analyze the series, and so having like someone's new voice, you know, come by and analyze it is definitely, it's like it sheds a lot of cool light on everything. And so
Thanks,
I think
I'm
we already
excited
mentioned this
to be a part of it.
Yeah, it's awesome to have you. Like, so I think we already mentioned it, but he's got a part 3 of his video series coming out. So that might be out soon. So I'll also wait for that.
Let me ask a question. Like, should I publish it?
I would say you should. I would say you should
part 3 on the internet.
Put part 3 on the internet. That's what I would say.
Should I let's see here. Should I hit the button?
Does he have it right now? He's got it right now.
Oh my god!
Should I do it?
I'm waiting to see. I'll watch it. I'll watch it as soon as the stream's over. If you have it up there right now. I'm waiting for a minute.
You know, like how many people got watching at the end of the stream here? Like, I don't know. There's probably no way to take a poll. Can we get some
15 people in stream right now? So.
Like, you know, does anyone want to see it? Did I hit the button? See, what's the chat saying?
All right, chat. You got to put something in the chat. Give us something. Give us something. Tell us if Moonman should post this button.
All 15 people actually need to give a 1-sentence prediction of what Mance Raider is up to with regards to the Battle of Wind.
What Mance Raider is doing? We got Redis. Redis is interested.
I'm going to give you 30
also
seconds.
one quick shout out to Redis again. Redis did a reading in one of my videos from the Varys and Illyrio series, so thank you very much to her because that was very cool. So yeah, definitely everyone give bravo to Redis. But who else we got in the chat? Does anyone else want to know what Mance Raider is up to? I want to see some more people here.
Yeah.
I don't have the here. I should bring up the stream so I can see these.
People were talking about the Githyanki a minute ago. We were talking about Githyanki still.
I know I brought 3 people into the chat. I don't know if they're still with us though.
Arthur in his story says he can't tell if his chair has a back. That's how edge of the seat he is for part 3. Yes, there we go.
What?
I can't tell if my chair has a back. That's how on edge of my seat I am for part 3. This is the truth.
I cannot wait for part
All right,
3.
let's see. Oh, if I was able to bring it up, okay. Let's see. We've got.
And then Theory of Ice and Fire says Mance Raider is Arthur Dane in the Crypts, getting proof now that John is Rhaegar's father. So I disagree, but I'm curious to see what Moonman says.
So the chat has spoken. We believe that part 3 of Stannis, That Peach in the Battle of Wind will reveal that Mance Raider is in fact Arthur Dane, and that Arthur Dane is Jon's father. Is that it?
Yeah.
Or Rhaegar is Jon's father. Oh well. Okay.
Dane's
All right.
getting evidence. He's gathering.
I hope I didn't give anything away. Okay. All right. Oh, that Mance Raider's secret main reason for coming to Winterfell. Okay. All right. We've got some stuff going on. All right. I'm gonna hit it.
Let's do it.
It's live. You heard
There
it
we
here
go.
on
Yeah.
Yeah.
Part 3.
All right.
After whatever 2 years or something of waiting for this. I don't know. Feels like that to me.
It's been a while
that I've been working on this. The most overwrought, embarrassingly overproduced midlife crisis of a theory video that's ever been made. It is. I've spent way too much time on this. There's no it's worth it to anybody who will watch this. How much time I put into this? It's so dumb. But I am glad to have it out there.
And you're gonna love the visuals.
I hope you'll all check it out.
The visuals are wonderful. It makes you want to watch those movies that you always have the clips of. I don't know the names of all of them, but you have a few movies in there that are kind of older films that you draw from. And I'm not familiar with them, but they look interesting just as pieces of film.
There's even more new movies in part 3 and a lot of returning from the same movies. You want to check out, you want to get into a silent film, you want to watch a silent film, one of the greatest to ever do it, Douglas Fairbanks. And this, you want to talk about something that's influential on George? Douglas Fairbanks' Robin Hood is basically, it's influential on it basically sets a template for Hollywood phony medievalism in 1922 that basically lasts through the end of the 60s, like what fake medieval shit looks like in Hollywood till about 1971, and it fucking rocks. The movie Douglas Fairbanks is so charming, it's so funny, it's so fun, it's so big, and there's some things in you're like, yeah, this feels like how I picture some elements of Ice and Fire, like ludicrously large castles, shit like that. But also some characters you will see absolutely feel like were meaningful to George. That's a great one I would recommend. But forget that's on YouTube. But watch my video first.
Yeah.
Then once you've watched part 3, go back and watch parts 1 and 2 and see if they some questions that you might have had maybe are a little more clear now.
To Theory of Ice and Fire, I don't know if you can put links in the chat, but if someone wants to put the links to Moonman's video in the chat.
I think someone already pasted the link, but it's not actually redirecting. It's just the link that you would need to copy and paste it.
Okay. Hang on one second. Let me see here. I think I can bring it out. Right here. Here we go. Stannis That Beach, part 3.
It is. I see it. It's live. I am on it.
Yeah. All right. Here we go. I'm trying to put it in the chat. There you go. That link right there. If you could just copy it, I don't know, or if you click on it, I'm not really sure how Streamlabs works or not, but that's it right there. I'll put it in the YouTube description too for anybody who's
tapping
late
on
to
it
the
works.
video. Okay, there you go. Yeah. For anyone who's late to the video too, I'll put it in the YouTube description. That way you can get to it. So to round up, do you want to? Does everyone want to give their outro? Moonman, do you want to give any sort of extra information before you leave, and then we can go to Andy and we can go to Russ last.
Oh, that's it. Just check out part 3. That's it. I've said my piece. Thank you. Thanks for putting that link out there. Thanks for having me on.
Oh yeah, no, of course.
Well, I'm Stoner Tormund. I am working on a video. I've been saying that for years, but life is just so busy for me. I do want to eventually release it because I've been trying to get this out for ages. And whenever I do, I will probably announce it on a rig stream or something like that.
Yeah. We're excited. We're excited for when Andy puts out the video. This will be pretty cool. We're like I said, a big part of Ice and Fire for me has been being a little creator and then interacting with lots of other little creators and having a good time doing that. It's very cathartic, It's a fun time. If I'm doing history class, I'm just doing hella reading and doing hella responses about stuff, and some of it's fucking fascinating. I'm reading Open Veins of Latin America from Latin American history class right now, and I've been meaning to read that book for 4 years now. It's been on my list for fucking ever. So it's good. It's good. But it's not always cathartic, right? And if I'm working on my own stuff, a lot of times I'm reading very fucked up shit. And again, it's not cathartic, right? Reading Honest Brevik's Manifesto, not cathartic. Ice and Fire, very cathartic, right? And so it's been a wonderful experience to be with the small creators and to talk about stuff and watch stuff and be part of the growing community and all that. Because there's like a whole, like, I think all of us who are kind of the smaller end of creators, we're all kind of this next generation of people who came in, and we all kind of grew up under watching the Alt Shift X and the Preston Jacobs and watching the Glidus and watching these people that were kind of the pioneers of, making shit about the series. There's a bunch of other people too. Like I never watched, but there was like, I think it was like, used to be called A Theory of Ice and Fire, and now it's called Quinn's Ideas. I never really watched, but he was huge. He did stuff for like, there's another guy called Alabaster that like, he never got big, but like 5-6 years ago, I want to say 4 years ago, he has tons of theories that are super epic, and I've watched people kind of like retread that ground, or I've been one of those people, So
Alt Shift X is who got me into this stuff.
Yeah, right. So you usually come to the theory because one of those old heads, basically from back in the day, who was making videos about it,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there was a Reddit
Preston
community
really
even before
inspired
that.
me,
Yeah.
And now I'm so glad. Like I wanted to be able to talk about this stuff with people, and I'm so glad to have found that community. But I was very much inspired by Preston to do this as YouTube videos.
Yeah. So anyway, he was one of those guys who I said he came from the Reddit group too, I believe. I think he wanted to get off Reddit and do something. Now, I don't know the whole lore of that, but it was good. It's been going on for a while, so there's always been a lot of interesting community in the Song of Ice and Fire. And it's been like a generational thing. They went from Reddit to YouTube. There's this new group of YouTubers now. Like, so it's very interesting. So, Ani, do you have anything else to say? Or do you want to kick it over to Rust?
No.
Yeah. Check out Alabaster. Alabaster is very interesting. He hasn't made videos that I want to say in at least 2 years, but it's a very interesting channel.
Yeah, I would kick it over to Rust. I don't have anything else to add here. I don't think.
All right. I just want to thank, I believe there was Holly and Eli and one more in the chat who came over with me. Thank you guys for watching. And I don't know if she's watching now either, but Mira Reeds is the whole reason I even am in this community. I introduced her to the idea of the videos by showing her an Alt Shift X video, and then like 2 months later, she sent me an invite to the Discord, and that's how I got here. So, yeah. So shout out to Mira Reeds for that. She has her own channel as well. Go watch her stuff, and I've got my own stuff. It's all my stuff is all back cataloged by now, but you can check out my channel if you want. Rust F. Shackleton and all the various platforms. I make history videos that you can use to secretly radicalize your friends. That's
definitely a big shout out to Mira Reeds. Mira Reeds has made a lot of cool videos. So go sub to her channel if you're interested in more Ice and Fire stuff. And then the Discord we're talking about is the Interesting Nerd Club Discord. So if anybody does Discord, Interesting Nerd Club, very cool guys. They run the Discord, and there's a ton of people there. Everyone's always talking about all kinds of fun stuff. Sometimes I even post food that I make there. All kinds of fun stuff happens. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining me. And we're going to close the stream out, but we'll be back this next weekend because I'm trying to do this on Saturdays now. So hopefully maybe we'll get some more talks about some more fun stuff. And I will see everybody then. So take it easy, everyone. I will talk to you guys later. Bye-bye.
See you.